Throughout my time on YouTube, I've covered a number of disturbing Reddit users, and in this video we're going to take a look back on some of the absolute worst. From psychopaths who fantasize about murdering people, to one user who fell in love with her dad. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video will cover a number of potentially triggering topics, such as murder, inappropriate relationships between family members, and people taking their own lives, among others. Viewer discretion is advised. You can click the link in the description to watch a longer, uncut and ad-free version of this video, which features extra details that were unsuitable for this cut. This is a video that I've wanted to make since I first ever started this channel. In my opinion, it's one of the most fascinating rabbit holes ever to have developed on Reddit. I'm not really sure how to summarise it in a couple of sentences for this intro, but if you're interested in cults and conspiracies and mysteries, then I think you'll really enjoy this video. Chris Cantelmo studied biochemistry and biophysics at Yale University. He owned a medical company, GL Sciences, as well as other companies before this. He was a well-educated and presumably at one point a well-respected member of society. So how did someone in that position so drastically deteriorate to the point where he debatably became a cult leader? It seems that Chris's journey into spiritualism began when he was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. He began using DMT and sometime after went into remission. This led him to believe that the DMT had cured his cancer. DMT is a powerful hallucinogenic drug. It's often referred to as the spirit molecule due to the intense psychedelic experience. Like most drugs, it's often used for fun, but some people also use it for spiritual reasons. It's not uncommon for people to feel like they have woken up or become enlightened after using it. Chris was one of these people, and in addition to believing it had cured his cancer, he also believed it could cure a range of illnesses and disorders from AIDS to autism. While those who possess some level of critical thinking skills might say that anecdotal evidence proves little and that correlation does not always imply causation, Chris's followers were taken in by this and genuinely believed that he had managed to cure his own cancer. Only he hadn't. He actually posted a video saying that he never even had cancer and that he just made it up for publicity.
Hey, before anyone wants to do an expose on me about cancer, I never had brain cancer. As far as I know, I've never had any form of cancer. But I do believe that DMT will cure it. It will cure all your diseases.
But then he went back on this and again started claiming that he had cancer and had cured it with DMT. This is one of the many lies and inconsistencies that you might find when researching this man.
I had the worst form of cancer. Atheism, and DMT cured that.
I honestly have no idea whether or not he ever had cancer. As far as I'm aware, he never posted proof, but regardless, I probably don't need to explain why Chris's supposed miracle cure probably wasn't the safest option. At best, he could give a cancer patient false hope, and at worst, people could suffer serious side effects as a result of taking the drug that he's recommending. While it's very difficult to overdose on DMT, and it's questionable whether or not anyone has died directly as a result of taking it, there are some very worrying side effects such as hypertension, seizures, flashbacks, and long-term psychosis. Chris promoted using it 3 times a day, but stated that he sometimes used it up to 10 times a day, which is obviously very risky. He seemed to change his mind on whether or not he supported so-called conventional cancer treatments, sometimes implying that they were toxic and other times saying that his method could be used alongside these other treatments. He seemed to differ from some quacks in the sense that he genuinely seemed to believe what he was saying. He wasn't just promoting some kind of snake oil and refusing to try it himself. He also wasn't profiting financially from these claims, if anything, quite the opposite. Most Reddit users who were aware of Chris and his claims first heard of him when it was brought to their attention that he would gild countless posts about him or comments on his posts. He first ever started posting on r/DMT, where he was welcomed for his long posts on the drug, but also for giving gold, silver or platinum to many replies. It's impossible to know how much money he spent doing so. Some guessed upwards of $100,000. He basically paid for many users' Reddit premium subscriptions for years. I'm not sure if anyone took him up on this, but he even offered to pay the expenses of any cancer patients that wanted to visit him and tried to cure their cancer with DMT. This resulted in a 3-day ban on Reddit. He also paid at least one person's college tuition fees and sent many others money via PayPal. While some genuinely believed his claims about DMT and the other crazy things that we'll get to soon, others only stuck around to profit from his generosity. Regardless, it was clear that this was not about making money for him, and he clearly had plenty of it to spare. Not that any of this makes his claims any more credible, but it does go to show that I think he genuinely believed what he was preaching, and his main goal was simply to get his unfounded message out there. While his beliefs on DMT are debatably what he is most well known for, they only really scratch the surface on Cantelmoism, the so-called religion that he founded. Let's take a look at the principles of his religion on his website. There is a section titled Discoveries of Chris Cantelmo, which lists his beliefs. If you don't want to listen to me read them all out, feel free to skip ahead a minute or two, but I feel that it's important to include all this directly in Chris's words in order to fully understand his claims. 1. There is a God. 2. God emits a cosmic broadcast of electromagnetic waves. 3. Humans and all other living creatures with a nervous system can receive information from God's cosmic broadcast while their neural network is enabled by DMT. 4. Instinctual behaviour in animals results from the behavioural instructions delivered to each organism via the cosmic broadcast. Imagine that each species has its own decryption key, so it interprets the cosmic data set according to its own specific behavioural needs. 5. Aliens are now present on Earth and hyperactive in an effort to save the Earth from an environmental disaster. The aliens have recognised Chris Cantelmo as the only human well versed enough to speak to the hearts and minds of every type of human. Aliens have demanded Chris to deliver the aliens' message, stop polluting and warmongering and overpopulating, or we will unleash an unstoppable plague and lethal worldwide epidemic. 6. Einstein's energy equation needs to be updated. 7. The second law of thermodynamics is wrong. The universe is getting increasingly organised and energetic, and its end state is already determined as a super complex wonderworld. 8. Free will in humans is an illusion, and the end state of every living thing follows suit. The consequence of this fact is anxiety should evaporate, since our individual actions are irrelevant to the outcome at all times. People should do the most enjoyable thing at every waking moment. 9. The nervous system of all living creatures is both a computer, information processing system, and an antenna which both broadcasts and receives electromagnetic waves in exactly the same way as a PC or Mac contains a CPU and a Wi-Fi circuit. DMT enables the Wi-Fi and increases the clock speed of the bio-CPU by quantum orders of magnitude above default mode of normal adult human brain function. 10. There is a DMT cycle in mammals in which DMT and hormones are inversely proportioned. The higher the level of hormones, the lesser the quantity of DMT produced by the pineal gland in the brain. DMT production is stopped altogether in humans at puberty and reinitiated in late adulthood. 11. The mental health syndromes called schizophrenia and autism are one and the same and result from a relative overabundance of bioavailable DMT. From here on, the syndromes can be unified as autophrenia. Autophrenics are geniuses and were created by God to be leaders of humanity, and lesser, normal adults were too stupid to see this in modern times. In ancient times, autophrenics were rulers. 12. Shakespeare, Galileo, Da Vinci, and all other historical geniuses, and probably Jesus himself, were autophrenics. Moses was either autophrenics or inhaled DMT released by burning acacia bush and saw spirits and received God's message. 14. Our modern industrialised world, particularly fluoridisation of water supplies and being told not to stare at the sun, has resulted in calcification of our pineal glands and an interruption of the natural DMT cycle. Staring at the sun and drinking deionized pure water rejuvenates pineal function. 15. Adding DMT to an adult brain via orally active ayahuasca or by vaping DMT crystals allows people to see spirits which are always around us but otherwise invisible, including a multitude of guardian angels voluntarily assigned to each of us. 16. A near-death experience occurs when the CO2 levels in the brain get so high that the pineal gland releases what it believes is the final dose of DMT into the brain, which is meant to enable our souls to be delivered back to God. This is why almost all near-death experienced people report seeing angels and aliens. 17. Nitrogen narcosis in scuba divers and anyone who breathes compressed air results from DMT being released in the CO2-enriched, oxygen-starved brain. 18. The euphoria delivered by laughing gas, nitrous oxide, at the dentist, or by doing whippets is created by the release of DMT by the brain. If you want to do DMT but do not have access to the chemical, just inhale nitrous oxide and you will get a sense of the DMT experience. 19. DMT has allowed Chris Cantelmo to unify the four fundamental forces in physics into one force, electromagnetism. The weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, and gravity are all manifestations of EM over distance. The only reason the notion of multiple forces originated is because gravity and its effects were clearly understood by everyone. When electricity was discovered later, it was assumed to be a separate force. A look at the force equations for EM and gravitation shows that they are identical. There is no such thing as gravity waves, and the LIGO detectors detect tectonic plate movements, not gravitation. Kip Thorne, Nobel Prize winner for his LIGO project, is an uber genius, but was led astray by the notion that gravity is a separate force. 21. Modern medicine and vaccines only make our immune systems weaker and are the source of all human suffering. God gave us all the immunity we need, and medical intervention should only be undertaken in life-threatening emergencies. Vaccines are the problem, not the solution. 22. A direct experience of God is vital and essential. All religions are formed after a charismatic human has God revealed through an experience with DMT. Religions fail by claiming exclusivity of the divine. Religion is a source of evil as certain as it is a force for enlightenment. 23. Money is the ultimate source of evil and results from greed. Money allows people the luxury of treating others poorly. When money is eliminated, peace will be restored to Earth. 24. Darwin's natural selection occurs at the species group level, not the individual level, and this explains altruism, heretofore a mystery to evolutionary biologists and psychiatrists. 25. Freud and Jung were well-meaning but wrong. The subconscious does not exist. Dreams foreshadow future events, and when that future event happens, we feel a déjà vu. 26. When matter is created by condensing light waves into particles, matter stays with us into the present and antimatter recedes into the past. Matter and antimatter are reunited at the end of the universe. 27. If Chris Cantelmo isn't the second coming, is anyone capable of so being? 28. Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead rule play Dark Star. So there's a lot to unpack there. To summarise some notable points, DMT is good, God and aliens exist, Chris knows better than Einstein and is in fact the second coming, vaccines and fluoridation of water are bad for you, staring into the sun is good for you, and money is evil. Some of these already sound a bit culty. It sounds like it could be like the beginning of some kind of Jonestown scenario. The sun gazing and DMT are potentially dangerous things to be promoting, and the idea that vaccines and fluoridation of water is unhealthy is kind of worrying. It very much gives off a vibe of everything you've been told is wrong, they were all lying to you, let me try and open your eyes to what's really going on. We can already see that many of these principles are based off conspiracy theories that have no proof backing them up. And lack of proof is something that comes up time and time again when researching Chris. He always claimed that his research was about to be published, but of course it never was. Whenever he was asked to prove his claims, he either just completely dodged the question, or told the person asking that they wouldn't believe him anyway, or told people who were already trying his methods to simply take more DMT and stop doubting. Chris made so many claims that contradicted themselves. He'd speak of something as if it was fact, and then sometime later completely go back on it without even acknowledging that he ever thought different. We could spend hours and hours talking about all the crazy things that Chris believed, but I don't think we'll gain much more from analysing the specific principles here, but rather from reading between the lines. It's hard to speculate on the mental state of someone that you don't know, but these ramblings were clearly not coming from a stable mind. Chris himself even admitted that he suffered from schizophrenia, but he didn't think that it was a bad thing. He thought that it made him a genius and allowed him to contact the spirit world and allowed him to see the world as it really was. So to answer the question of how Chris ended up here, the short answer would be schizophrenia mixed with hallucinogenic drugs. I'm not sure how long ago Chris was diagnosed with schizophrenia, whether it was before or after he began using DMT. This could have either worsened his condition or facilitated it. But he said himself that he believed that DMT caused schizophrenia, and he even encouraged it. He thought the hallucinations were real. Now that we've analysed Chris's beliefs and the principles of Cantelmoism, I think it might be a good time to actually look at whether or not Cantelmoism could be classed as a cult. Chris did have followers, but claimed that Cantelmoism was a religion rather than a cult. I feel that cult is often a word that is overused and misused, which is important because if we start calling any kind of group a cult, then it kind of lessens the impact of the word, and people might not take a genuine cult so seriously. Let's take a look at a checklist of cult characteristics and see how many apply to Cantelmoism. The group is focused on a living leader to whom members seem to display excessively zealous, unquestioning commitment. Yes. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. Yes. The group is preoccupied with making money. No, but money is indirectly relevant to the recruitment of new followers. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. Yes. Mind-numbing techniques such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, debilitating work routines are used to suppress doubts about the group and its leader. Not exactly, but drug use could possibly fall under this, and he offered to pay for his followers to visit him, so maybe this had something to do with this. The leadership dictates sometimes in great detail how members should think, act and feel. For example, members must get permission from leaders to date, change jobs, get married. Leaders may prescribe what type of clothes to wear, where to live, how to discipline children, and so forth. Chris does dictate how followers should think and act, but I don't think they had to get permission from him to make their own life decisions. The group is elitist, claiming a special, exalted status for itself, its leader, and members. For example, the leader is considered the Messiah or an avatar. The group and/or the leader has a special mission to save humanity. Yes, Chris claimed he was the second coming, and some of his followers referred to him as a god. He also believed he needed to save the world from the aliens. The group has a polarised us versus them mentality, which causes conflict within the wider society. Yes. The group's leader is not accountable to any authorities, as are, for example, military commanders and ministers, priests, monks, and rabbis of mainstream denominations. Yes. The group teaches or implies that its supposed exalted ends justify means that members would have considered unethical before joining the group, for example collecting money for bogus charities. Somewhat, he also emphasises doing what you want in every moment, which could potentially lead to unethical behaviours. Ethics aside though, he definitely promotes things that most people would think were dangerous. The leadership induces guilt feelings in members in order to control them. Yes, he even faked his own death on Twitter a while back to manipulate his followers. Members' subservience to the group causes them to cut ties with family and friends and to give up personal goals and activities that were of interest before joining the group. Potentially, you can definitely see how that might happen, but I don't necessarily think that that was Chris's intentions. Members are encouraged or required to live and/or socialise only with other members of the group. Not really, but Chris did offer to pay for his followers to come visit him and said that he wished he had the space for thousands of homeless people to live on his land, some of whom have been drawn in by his beliefs and claims. So overall, I don't think it would be unreasonable to call Cantelmoism a cult. It checks most of the main boxes. For some time, Cantelmoism grew. However, as I said before, it was clear that some of the followers were only sticking around hoping to gain from Chris, whether that was in Reddit awards or actual money. After some time though, Chris realised this and stopped sending people money.
I'm not sending out money to people anymore because I realize that just perverts the whole situation. People get money, they think they deserved it.
When Chris's generosity declined, so did his following, who now didn't see a reason to stand by a man whose beliefs they only defended for financial gain. If you cherry-picked comments, you might see Chris as a pretty crazy guy with some outlandish beliefs, but still a good person nevertheless. Someone who paid people's tuition fees and allowed homeless people to take a shower in his house whenever they wanted, wishing that he had space for thousands of them to sleep in his backyard. But if you dug a little deeper, you might find a different side. Someone who is pretty angry and intolerant of any criticism. Someone who even went to the lengths of debatably bullying some people, including cancer patients, who tried to stop him spreading false information.
Christine, exactly how huge a moron are you? How lazy and stupid can you be? You're a disaster. Shut the up. No one wants to hear you're a miserable, lazy idiot. Now purify the stuff and shut the fuck up. Get off your lazy, non-committal. Make a difference. Stop creating plastic. Stop being stupid. Make a difference. Call your local news stations. Get them to get off and make a difference. I've had it. You guys are idiots.
He was caught out multiple times using alternate accounts to manipulate his followers and took action against people who tried to expose him. He would snap like a moody teenager on Reddit or Twitter, and speaking of teenagers, that's the demographic that he targeted for his cult, which is pretty worrying. Teenagers are more likely to be indoctrinated, especially when they're being showered with gifts. There were also reports that Chris had been inappropriate with some of his young followers. I'm yet to see any proof of that, or at least proof of anything illegal, but he probably did cross boundaries. I don't want to mislead here. Again, I haven't seen any proof that he actually came onto any teenagers or made any suggestive comments in relation to himself, but according to some ex-followers, he did overstep the mark a bit. A post was made on RBI from a teenager who got to know Chris through all this. They actually had a somewhat positive view of him and didn't believe Cantelmoism was a cult. So it does seem that they might have been manipulated, as Chris apparently told them that they were his best friend and that one time he almost ended his life but they saved him. That's a lot to put on a teenager and does sound potentially manipulative. I'm not saying there aren't situations where an adult and a teenager can be friends on some level and there's nothing more to it, but there's definitely something a bit weird about a guy in his 50s making a habit of befriending teenagers and telling them this kind of stuff. In order to gain insight into the situation, I contacted a user on Reddit who was one of Chris's followers to ask them a few questions. Here's the conversation we had. At what point did you become a follower? When I got my first platinum. How old are you? Turning 17 in 2 days. Did Chris find you on r/teenagers or another subreddit? No, I found him because I was looking up what an award was. Can you describe your relationship with Chris? How much contact did you have with him on a personal level? Did you DM or text, etc.? We texted all the time. He was a really great person. Did you ever feel that Chris was inappropriate with you or crossed any boundaries? Chris was never inappropriate. Sometimes he just needed someone to talk to because he was lonely, but never inappropriate. Were there any moments you nearly stopped supporting Chris? I did support Chris till the end, never questioned him because his ideas were always somewhat backed up. Did/do you believe all of Chris's claims about the DMT, aliens, staring into the sun, etc., or were you just there for the awards he was giving out? Sungazing is a scientifically proven thing, and DMT, yeah, don't recall the alien thing, but I think he was a smart dude. Would you still class yourself as a Cantelmoist, and do you still follow Chris's teachings? I think Chris overall a GOAT, and I still do consider myself one. Do you think Cantelmoism is a cult? Cantelmoism isn't a cult, more just like a group of people with a leader who gave us stuff, kinda like a sugar daddy to a whole bunch of people, and we just had to be his friend. Some of us, however, actually cared. He was my friend. Thanks to Lodricodine for answering my questions. For obvious reasons, I'm going to avoid analysing and speculating on these answers, but it's there for you to make your own mind up. I'm now going to list off a few things that he did that put his followers off, though for some of these I couldn't find any solid proof. Seeing as r/Cantelmoism was shut down, Chris's Reddit account was banned and he deleted many of his videos, I'm having to rely mostly on posts from Cantelmoism Exposed, but comments seem to corroborate each event. Chris uploaded videos showing himself driving on acid and causing a scene in the middle of the road. He bullied a girl who was considering taking her own life and tried to get someone fired after they stopped following him. He was known to harass many other users who simply disagreed with him. He used his followers like his own personal army, encouraging them to jump on people who even slightly criticised him. He impersonated one of the moderators on Cantelmoism Exposed and seriously tried to ruin his reputation. He sent death threats to various people. He made a whole subreddit dedicated to making fun of his brother, who he hated for some reason. But that's just a quick list. You can find many more on Cantelmoism Exposed. The police were called to Chris's home on more than one occasion, either by his friends or followers who were worried about him, or people who never were followers but just saw that this man was ill and needed help, but of course that didn't go down well. What was interesting about his downfall was that some of his followers turned against him but still classed themselves as Cantelmoists. A now deleted user made a post on Cantelmoism Exposed. It read, "Yeah, I'm posting on here because it seems this place is more of an anti-Chris than anti-Cantelmoism, and we are all anti-Chris now too. Chris is crazy as hell right now, doxing mods and trying to outcast members, and when people call the police to his house to help him, or try and message him to calm him down, he flips. So he's in isolation right now, and we aren't going to feed him with attention. I have always had some respect for the man because of some good conversations we had, and some of his points on the universe and beliefs. However, he ruins everything because every time he makes a good point, he puts in a load of drama in between it all. I'm just letting Exposed know that we don't support Chris currently, and we don't plan on ever welcoming him back because of his bad behaviour. As far as I've seen from the mods, and I am perfectly okay with that too. And to whoever is making negative comments on his videos, stop. You are only feeding his behaviour, just don't even let him have the satisfaction of deleting your comment." It was almost like his own creation had outgrown him. Now you might question how Reddit admins allowed this to go on for so long. He was banned a few times for 3 days, but that was about it. But he was spending thousands and thousands of dollars on the site. They probably didn't agree with what he was doing, but they weren't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. If they had, maybe the cult wouldn't have developed into what it did. Maybe things would have ended differently.
You've reached the Los Angeles Police Department Foothill Community Police Station. We are currently open. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911.
Hi, how are you? I wanted to know if I wanted to do a wellness check on someone, is this the right place to call? Yeah, his name is Chris Cantelmo. I talked to him last week, and I kind of check in on him periodically, and I haven't heard anything from him in a week, which is unlike him.
Chris's followers and friends hadn't heard anything from him for a few days. Despite being pretty consistent in posting on Twitter, his last tweet had been on the 2nd of November, all his known accounts on Reddit had been banned, and his subreddit was long gone too. While most had turned against him by this point, he still had a handful of loyal followers who stood by him throughout it all. Until the 24th of November 2019, when Chris Cantelmo, at the age of 57, decided to take his own life. His body was found a day or two later by someone who later commented on a Reddit post explaining what they saw. The cause of death was determined to be sharp force injuries of the neck and forearms. As soon as the news was posted on r/dead redditors and subsequently shared on various other subreddits, conspiracy theories began spreading. Some people believed that this was not Chris, that he'd somehow faked his own death. He'd done it before, right? Only there was no body last time, just him pretending on Twitter. One user claimed that they had spoken with one of Chris's alternate accounts after his alleged time of death. Apparently they communicated just like Chris, using insults and acting strange in the same way he did. While this would certainly have been strange for the user, not at the time realising he was dead, they were likely in contact with one of his followers on that account and not Chris himself. Another conspiracy theory that did the rounds on Reddit was that Chris was actually murdered. People thought that the circumstances were suspicious and that he was right about DMT curing cancer, so someone, I guess from Big Pharma, killed him to cover up his discovery.
Chris Cantelmo's death needs to be investigated by an independent investigator not related to the government. His family and everybody in the world should push for another autopsy done by somebody who is not a coroner working for the government, but an independent investigator.
But as tragic as Chris's death was, it wasn't a massive shock to those that knew him personally, as well as anyone who had watched the situation unfold. He had been hospitalised before after psychotic episodes where he'd attempted to take his own life, and anyone could see that his mental health was deteriorating in the months prior. He'd gone from being kinda strange but still reasonable and capable of debating different views, to an intolerant and angry man who exploded and plotted against anyone who disagreed with him. Some would even argue that there were warning signs before things started really going downhill, such as him spending so much money on Reddit. Stories like this often get sensationalised, and people like to believe it's a lot more mysterious than it actually is. While it's definitely a fascinating rabbit hole, I don't think there's any mystery or huge conspiracy at play here. The sad reality of the situation is that a seriously mentally ill man started self-medicating, which made his illness even worse. He tried to spread his message to the world, and things just kinda got way out of hand as his illness slowly consumed him. I can't and don't really want to justify his actions, but having researched him pretty thoroughly, I don't think I could confidently say that Chris was a wholly bad person. I can't remember when I first ever heard of Cantelmoism, but it was before Chris's death. I went down the rabbit hole and just kind of forgot all about it after a while. Then I heard a few months later that he was dead, and even as an observer, someone who had no personal ties to Chris or to Cantelmoism, it was kind of surreal. This was once a successful man, who could have done great things. He had a family, but they disowned him because of all this. He was lonely, the attention probably made him feel slightly less so, but when people started to turn on him, to him it probably seemed like the whole internet were against him. He did some questionable, erratic and morally wrong things, there's no denying that, but I still just think it's really tragic that this was a man that needed help, and he never got it before it was too late. But we also can't forget about the followers. While some, like Dracodine, had only positive experiences with Chris, there were undoubtedly many others that were harmed in some way or another by Chris and his actions. Most of whom were vulnerable, as most people who end up joining cults are, whether this was because they were young or they were suffering from schizophrenia or cancer or one of the many other illnesses that Chris claimed that he knew how to cure. There's definitely a morbid fascination to this case, but if there's any meaningful lesson to be taken from it, it's that mental illness is no joke. A few years ago, a Reddit account by the name of Lady Iris was created. While some of her posts and comments were no cause for concern, others seemed to hint that she might be a serial killer in the making. Let's investigate. If you were shown a select few of Lady Iris's posts, you probably wouldn't think anything was amiss. She's married, she's a piano teacher, she seems to have an interest in baby names, and her first post in 2015 was a photo of some puppies. However, there's another side to Iris, a depraved side that enjoys violence and fantasises about murdering and torturing people. For all we know, it's gone beyond fantasy. Lady Iris isn't Iris's only account. She had already made a name for herself as Allegretta, though it sounds like she was shadow banned on that account. Unfortunately, it has since been suspended. You can find quite a few of her posts by googling the username, but Iris did say in a comment that she was trying to tame down her posts now to avoid getting banned again, so it's likely that the worst posts were deleted. The most recent account I found was under the name Porcelain Peony, and another of her usernames was False Virtues. From August 2015, possibly long before that on other accounts, Iris was active most days and most frequently posted on Ask Reddit and the Morbid Questions subreddit. As the name Morbid Questions suggests, that subreddit is full of questions about death, murder, torture and various other gory topics. I think it's safe to assume that the vast majority of people who post there are not murderers or sadists, they're just normal people with morbid curiosity, like me and probably you too if you're watching this. Iris's first few posts could have passed as just that, morbid curiosity. She asked for people's opinions on suicide, what would happen if someone was forced to swallow Drano, which is drain cleaner, what are the best ways to cause extreme harm to people that won't instantly cause their death. I mean, that one out of context is pretty questionable, but it wouldn't exactly stand out on that subreddit. Still, at least at first, there was no indication that Iris actually took enjoyment out of violence and torture. That wasn't until a post asking why there was no link to a homicide hotline on the sidebar of Morbid Questions. If you're anything like the top commenter, you're probably thinking that would just be 999 or 911 depending where you live, but Iris clarifies that she means a hotline where you can talk to someone if you feel like you want to kill someone, as if that's a normal thing. She goes on to debate with users who think she would or should be arrested for admitting that on a hotline, and she makes a fair point that it's better to ask for help than to actually kill someone, but when people's lives are at stake, it's hard to be down with taking that chance. She makes it clear that it's not about anger management, it's a sadistic urge to commit homicide, and she implies she needs help coping. I'm sure there are plenty of people who have thought about murdering a specific person. Of course most would never do it, but for Iris, it's not that there's a specific individual who has made her life hell in some way, or someone who's committed an awful crime themselves and she would see murdering them as revenge or justice. As the following post will show, it seems that she just generally wants to inflict pain and suffering on someone because she would enjoy it. It would excite her even. She asks a variety of questions relating to murder and torture, some are very specific. I'll list a few of them now. What are the best places to shoot someone if you don't want them to die instantly? What are some fun and brutal ways to physically torture people? Why is it so thrilling to see violence happening to other people? What are some creative ways to kill someone and make it look like an accident? What do you think it feels like to beat someone to death? What happens if you put a cat in the microwave and turn it on? How does it feel to choke someone until they can't breathe? What are some of the best places to stab someone if you don't want them to die of blood loss? How long do you believe it would take for a person to die of malnutrition if they were only given water and McDonald's French fries indefinitely? It's worth noting that Iris isn't necessarily considering acting on all of the things that she thinks about and asks Reddit about. If nothing else, she does seem a very honest person when talking about all this, and while she openly admits to wanting to torture people and even describes how she would do that on occasion, some of the topics she posted about seem to be out of general interest. For example, she has posted about mass shootings before, but said that she has no desire to do that herself, which makes sense. Shooting people is much too quick a death to appeal to her. At times, Iris considers the morality of murder. It's hard to tell whether she's just genuinely interested in the moral debate, or she gets some kind of kick out of contemplating it, or if she's just trying to find a way to rationalise what she might go on to do, or perhaps even what she's already done. It seems that she's at least interested in determining when most people would consider murder ethical. For example, one of her questions was, if there was undeniable proof that a very pleasant afterlife existed for all human beings, would it still be frowned upon to kill innocent people? I get the feeling that some of her questions show her attempt to dissuade herself from murdering someone. For example, one on Ask Reddit read, "Besides prison and the death penalty, what are some good reasons not to kill anyone?" Though she has also asked for good reasons to kill someone too, it's almost like she's weighing up the pros and cons of it. On the whole, Iris seems fairly sure she won't murder anyone. She likes her life and freedom and she doesn't want to be caught or killed. She wouldn't rule it out though. It seems that she's pretty set on not killing any family members, but on numerous occasions she's made it clear that at some point she might no longer be able to contain the urge. The bottom line is, she really doesn't see a problem with taking someone else's life. The only thing stopping her is the possibility of getting caught. There's quite a bizarre contrast between her seemingly calm, at least somewhat intelligent demeanour, and the fact that there simply appears to be a missing link in her mind that prevents her from understanding why murder is unethical. In quite a few of her comments, she compares murdering a human to killing animals. For example, in response to someone saying that you have no right to choose whether someone lives or dies, she says, "And why not? We make that choice for animals all the time." But rather than using that as a point to highlight that maybe that's unethical for animals, she's using it as a justification for murdering humans. It's also worth noting that she says she hates racism. Perfectly logical opinion, but it's just weird to think that someone who would have no qualms literally taking someone else's life even cares about inequality or discrimination. It seems that Iris has had these urges ever since she was a child. She says she believes it started with her being enamoured by bad characters on TV and having a curiosity for actions that go against what is considered right. She was always a good kid, at least on the surface, but the pressure to be that way caused her to want to defy. She became obsessed with watching increasingly violent movies, and by the time she was a teenager, she realised that she got pleasure out of violence. Iris has clearly thought in depth about how she would go about murdering someone, from the method to the victim. The methods are a bit too graphic to discuss in this cut, but let's just say it seems that she would want to torture someone for a long time before they died. She says that she has harmed people before, only with their consent, but the consent takes most of the fun out of it. As for her victim, she's not really picky, but it makes sense for her to go for a woman, considering she is a woman herself and not very strong, and doesn't think she could overpower a man. She wouldn't rule out targeting a man, or someone who is bigger than her, but she'd need to drug them. She's not interested in poisoning anyone because that'd be too quick. The only thing she specifies about the victim is that she would need to have no ties to them. Until now, we've only seen a glimpse of Iris's fantasies, and on the whole she maintains that she probably won't kill anyone in real life. However, at least one of her fantasies became a reality, as she has admitted to killing a cat and harming other animals. I couldn't find when Iris first ever spoke about this, so I'm not exactly sure when it was, or how much detail she went into when describing it. This is obviously a huge red flag. It's already awful to think a poor cat died, but many serial killers start out by harming animals before moving on to humans. Iris actually said in a comment that she doesn't get any enjoyment out of harming animals. I hope that means she wouldn't do it again, but it could also make her more likely to move on to humans, because animals clearly don't satisfy that urge. Either way, she has actually committed a crime. It's gone beyond fantasy, so if she could be reported, there's a chance she'd face consequences for that, which might deter her even more from harming a person. The fact that very little is known about Iris makes it hard to report her though. I imagine if she made plans to commit a mass shooting or something on a larger scale and posted that online, there's probably a way that the FBI can find out her IP address from Reddit. But unfortunately, I doubt they'd take animal cruelty quite so seriously. At least one Reddit user claims to have reported Iris, but with limited information, the chances of her getting caught are slim. As for what we do know about Iris, or at least what she's told us, she's in her early 30s. She teaches children how to play the piano. She's married and has no kids. She lived in Texas at some point a few years ago but has moved several times since, and that's about it. The most specific detail is that she teaches piano, but even then I imagine there are thousands of female piano teachers who lived in Texas at some point, and that's assuming she's told us the truth about herself. She could have a totally different job, or be a totally different age, or she might not even be a woman for all we know. You might have been relieved when I said that Iris doesn't have kids, however it sounds like she plans to in the future. She also teaches kids and comes into contact with her nieces and nephews, who I assume are children, but I haven't seen the age specified. It's a worrying thought that children are in her life already, though it's not clear if she spends time alone with them. At least there's probably a smaller chance she'd harm them if someone else is usually with them, but if she had her own, there's a lot more opportunity. She claims that she would never kill her husband or any future children she might have, but I don't know how she can be so sure if she's not even sure that she could control the urge to murder in general. All it might take is for a child to particularly misbehave one day and she just snaps, or maybe she eventually regrets having children and sees killing them as the most logical solution. She can't be trusted around animals, let alone children, but the worrying part is that if no one is aware of her fantasies and the animal cruelty, who's going to stop her being around more animals and even children? Iris said that her husband is pretty much fully aware of her sadistic urges, and that she has told her friends a watered-down version of what goes on in her mind. I wonder if her husband really knows the extent of it though, particularly that she will possibly act on her urges one day, and that she already has when it came to the cat. Most people have the occasional dark thought, but it goes well beyond that for Iris, and I just can't imagine being happily married to someone that for all you know might well murder you one day. Some people believe that Iris is just an elaborate troll, someone trying to be an edgelord for internet points. They think the way she spoke was like someone trying to be edgy and crazy rather than someone who actually is. Analysing things like this can sometimes be useful, but it's not really a solid way of proving someone is trolling. Everyone has a different style when communicating on the internet, and regardless, Iris may well have been an edgelord, but that doesn't mean she didn't do the things that she claimed to, and that she doesn't have sadistic urges. Whether she would want to admit it or not, I get the feeling that she liked that people were shocked by her. She was always very matter-of-fact in the way that she described her fantasies. Sometimes she spoke as if they were completely normal, like you're the odd one out if you don't have those urges. I don't think that makes it any more or any less likely that she was being truthful though. She wouldn't be the first person to enjoy having that kind of persona. A couple of minor inconsistencies have been highlighted in things that Iris has said, but generally she's pretty consistent, and I wouldn't be surprised if she intentionally throws in a few red herrings to make sure no one identifies her. Overall, I don't think there's much reason to believe that Iris is a troll. I think that theory just makes people feel more comfortable. She's been posting on Reddit very frequently for at least 5 years now, possibly much longer. It's a lot of effort to go to without really gaining much from it. She is familiar to some users who have frequented Morbid Questions for a few years, and every now and then you see a name pop up in a thread elsewhere, but she's hardly famous from this. Each new account she created has, up until now, been linked to her by others, but she doesn't go out of her way to make it clear that she is Lady Iris on a new account. In fact, sometimes she's tried to hide it to avoid getting banned again. Eventually, she can't help herself and admits it. As I said, she clearly enjoys all this, but it's not obvious that she's trolling. Another suggestion is that Iris is a crime writer who is struggling for ideas and hopes to get inspiration from Reddit. In discussions about her, I've seen a couple of other writers claim to do the same thing, albeit not anywhere near on that level. It also initially seemed a possibility that Iris was an actor who was trying to get into character. Both these theories became less and less likely the longer this went on though. If she was a writer, surely she'd have either written the book by now, or at least know what she was writing about, or she'd have given up after over 5 years. If she was an actor, you'd think she'd have played the role by now. It just makes no sense that she would post so frequently for such a long time. As far as I could find record of, Iris's most recent interaction was in December 2020. It's been around 10 months since then, so what happened to her? I'd like to think that she was just an edgelord who got bored of trolling, but I don't believe that's the case. Did she get sick of creating new accounts after each one got banned and eventually just abandon Reddit? Maybe she moved to a different site with less restrictions, like 4chan for example. Or maybe she's still lurking on Reddit, either not posting at all or only occasionally posting so people don't clock on that it's her. It's possible that she started to become wary after a few people claimed to have reported her to the authorities. She said on a different account to the one that she initially spoke about this on that no one could prove that she harmed any animals. But we just don't know what she's done in the past. Unfortunately, the law doesn't care enough about animals to thoroughly investigate Iris for that alone, but there's every chance that she's gone further than that in the past and hasn't been stupid enough to admit it. Perhaps she was already under investigation for something, and when people reported her account, the links were made and she was arrested. Even if she didn't already harm anyone by the time she stopped posting, there's every chance she had enough of fantasizing about murder and finally decided to actually do it. We'll probably never know. I did notice that one user, SithisVX, seemed to be friends with Iris. At least they had some level of contact with her and even claimed to have seen a photo of her. I haven't totally ruled out Sithis just being another of Iris's accounts, a tamer one that she uses to talk about her other interests. They were created within a month of each other, and Sithis doesn't obsessively post about such morbid topics, yet they're totally fine associating with someone who openly admits they harmed animals and might kill a human in the future. Still, assuming Sithis isn't Iris, I messaged them asking what happened to her but haven't got a reply, and I doubt I will considering the account has been inactive for over a year. While it's a terrifying possibility that Iris could or already has harmed or killed someone, I think the scariest part about all this is the insight that you gain from a depraved person living an outwardly normal life. She claims to be caring and nurturing to the people in her life, and also claims to have empathy, but it sounds like the desire to gain pleasure from harming someone would override any empathy she feels in a situation where she wouldn't face any consequences. We often stereotype murderers and predators to the point where we're surprised when they don't fit that stereotype. It's just more comforting to think that you could pick one out of a crowd and that you could avoid them, rather than to acknowledge the huge amount of trust you place in so many different people every single day, assuming that they won't just suddenly flip and murder you. The truth is, Iris could be anyone. It could be your partner, your best friend, your co-worker, and there's no way of determining what percentage of the population fantasizes about these things, as it's not something that most people would want to admit. Think about how many unsolved murders there are, not to mention disappearances that were probably murders but the bodies were never found. Then think about how many more people haven't murdered anyone yet, but gain pleasure in other sick ways, such as by hurting animals. And then think how many more than that enjoy thinking about these things but don't actually act on it. People like Lady Iris remind us that we're not as safe as we think we are, and that anyone in our lives could be a ticking time bomb. In May 2017, a Reddit user made a post confessing to murdering his ex-girlfriend, claiming he acted in self-defense when an argument got out of hand. At first, other users wondered if the OP was a troll, but his confession was soon revealed to be true, only the reality of the situation was much worse than he had described. Let's investigate. On the 2nd of May 2017, a Reddit user by the name of RedAsBlue101, real name Arga, made a post on the Canada News subreddit titled, "Wanted for Kitchener Murderer, My Side." Kitchener is a city in Ontario, Canada. Surprisingly, the post didn't attract much attention at first. Within 4 hours, it had a total of 6 comments, one being from a bot. When it was shared on the drama subreddit though, it started to blow up, and people were baffled as to how such a shocking post flew under the radar for a while. The post read, I understand the early judgments made by society. Distancing myself makes it seem like I'm trying to escape a crime. I'm not. I'm only trying to give myself some space and fully take in what happened before I turn myself in. The fact is, no one is more destroyed than I am. She was more than a girlfriend, a soon-to-be fiancé. She was my everything. What happened that night was nothing but tragic. Looking back, we've been in a relationship for a year and 3 months. This was the first serious long-term relationship for the both of us, so everything we did was a new experience. We travelled the world, our families met, had fights and made up, talked seriously about marriage and kids, the whole deal. I would never physically hurt her in any way. She would occasionally hit or slap me when I said something stupid, but I'd laugh it off. She met all my friends and family. Wherever I went, she was there. She would come to my house from Kitchener every week, about an hour, starting Fridays, and would stay for 3 or 4 days. We were incredibly used to each other. The last month of our relationship, I started asking her to give me some space so I can work on my job. She started coming less and less like I asked. During March, her friend Anna got pregnant. Melinda and Anna then moved in together because Anna has a big family and wanted privacy in case she keeps the baby. I never met any of Melinda's friends at this stage, 1.2 years in. She told me all her friends only use her. That part was incredibly clear to me. They would only contact her if they needed their hair done or had boyfriend problems, including Anna. 1.3 months in, April, Melinda and I got into an argument via text and our relationship ended. I went to her apartment that day to try and talk. Every time I tried breaking up with her, she would call my mum or drive down to my house, so this time I figured I'd do the same. Upon arrival, I was confronted by Anna's brother and her boyfriend. A physical altercation took place and the police were involved. At this stage, I knew if we were to patch things up, it would be rough. We didn't see each other for a few weeks. Later on in April, Melinda and I started texting each other again. We agreed to see each other and talk. She was originally supposed to drive down to my house but felt sick, so I told her I would come and she agreed. Aga mentioned a physical altercation involving Anna's brother and her boyfriend where police got involved. He's kind of downplaying this. The incident occurred 1 month before this post and resulted in Aga being charged with breaking and entering and 2 counts of assault. After this, there was a restraining order preventing him from contacting Melinda or entering the entire Waterloo region, which includes Kitchener, the city Melinda lived in. Aga shared screenshots of the messages between him and Melinda from the 27th of April on the day they arranged to meet. At 5:15 p.m, Melinda says she just finished, I'm guessing she means work, and has half an hour before taking her dad somewhere. She says she feels so sick it's crazy. Aga replies, drink some water and get some rest. Don't drive here if you're feeling sick. I'll come to you. Melinda, I don't even think I can make it to my dad. I feel that shitty. My whole body aches. I feel like I'm gonna faint. Aga, okay, now I'm actually worried about you. Melinda, I'll see if my sister can drive him instead so I can do nap. Aga, I'm going to leave work now. Gonna go home and get out of this uncomfortable suit. We'll have a relaxed conversation and I'll take care of you. Melinda, no, stay at work. I'll nap and let you know when I'm up. Aga says he'll stay at work until 6, then at 6:29 p.m, quote, I'm just driving home. When you're up, let me know if tonight is for sure or not. Just over an hour later, Melinda tells him she just woke up and isn't feeling any better. He replies, I know what will make you feel better. I'll be there by 11. Melinda responds, you can't help. And he says, we shall see. Anyways, I'm gonna go get ready. Melinda then says she wants to run it by Anna first when she gets home so she doesn't freak out, and Aga tells her to tell Anna it's a guy who looks like him as he's kinda lost weight. Aga set off driving around an hour later, and Melinda tells him to come through the front door, not the side door, and text her when he's in the lobby. Aga says, "Yeah, I don't think I want to look at that side door ever again." I'm guessing the side door had something to do with the incident around 3 weeks prior. Melinda tells Aga to stay in his car for a bit until Anna has taken her sister Christina to the bar. She didn't want Christina to know he's coming or to see him. At 11:59 p.m, Melinda says, "I think the coast is clear," and Aga replies, "Okay, coming, buzz me in." Although Melinda eventually seems to accept Aga coming over, at first it certainly seems like she doesn't want him to. She's ill and tells him he can't help, but he won't take the hint and basically just ignores what she's saying and insists on going. This was the final text conversation between them, and quite possibly the last text Melinda ever sent. The rest of Aga's post explained his version of what happened next. Quote, "Melinda told me Anna and her boyfriend were present. Incident from before might make things awkward. I didn't mind. Upon arrival, it was just Melinda. She said Anna went to drop Christina off at a club, Melinda's sister. She invited me to her room right away. We cuddled and talked. We never spend so much time away from each other. We just cuddled, kissed, and talked about everything. A while later, Anna came back with another friend. She asked Melinda if everything was okay, and Melinda said yes. Anna will attest to this if she is honest. We continued to talk and finally decided it was worth it to try one more time. However, Melinda didn't want anyone to know, especially her family. She said after the police were involved in a physical altercation with Anna's brother and boyfriend, things wouldn't be right if they knew right away. I agreed we would keep it on the down low until things cooled down. We continued to talk. Anna and her other friend left the house to grab some food. We both let everything out and our relationship was back on track. As I'm getting ready to leave, she asked me if I had done anything with any other girls while we were on break, or any time we were on break. I told her we needed to be honest and said yes, and told her about it. She started freaking out. Wouldn't say a word and just kept slapping me with tears in her eyes. Slaps turned into hits. I told her I was sorry, but if she didn't stop, I'd do something back. She didn't stop. I then stupidly pushed her, harder than I expected. She fell against the sink. This was the first time I ever did something physically violent towards her. I told her I was sorry. She said leave now. I began saying sorry even more and asked if I could get a hug. She was still crying. I go up to her to try and give her a hug. Almost out of nowhere, she grabs a knife by the sink. Initially, I thought she was just going to hold it to try and tell me to leave. She doesn't. She comes at me in full force, aiming towards my face. I tell her to stop. She doesn't. I tried grabbing the knife but ended up cutting my hands. After a few cuts, I lost it. I freaked out. I was scared and in a state of shock. Never in 100 years did I think she would use a knife against me. Out of shock and fear, I grab one. I hit her with it, almost blindly, a few times. I didn't know what happened. I was confused, shocked and scared. I had no intentions of that happening. When I left, I honestly thought she just passed out. Then I looked at the blood and started freaking out and just ran. I didn't know for sure she had died until the next day. I honestly had no intentions of ever doing that to her. I was protecting myself. She was with me the most. We were each other's best friends. She would tell me everything. Her deepest secrets that not even her friends or family knows. The amount of regret and sadness is beyond words. Everyone else is just reading or talking about it. I lived it. I was there. I did it. Every waking second I relive that moment. At this stage, life is really not worth it for me. Although it was out of shock and protection, I should have just accepted getting hit. Maybe I would have lived, maybe not. Anything is better than living with this. The way Aga describes the situation, it's like things went from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. I can't really blame him for pushing her away if she wouldn't stop slapping and hitting him, but he really should have just left after that. She told him to leave, and instead, he tried to force a hug onto her when she was clearly in an agitated state. That wouldn't justify her pulling a knife on him, but notice how he says he got cut because he grabbed the knife, not because she was actually stabbing him. It sounds like he still had the option to leave at this point. If he was able to grab another knife without her stabbing him, he probably could have just walked out. Yet he chose to stab her, not hit her with it, as he said, trying to downplay it. He stabbed her, then finally left, without checking she was still alive or calling an ambulance for her. His version of events already doesn't reflect good on him, but I highly doubt things went down in the way he described anyway. Some of the commenters were a bit skeptical of the post, wondering if it was all a fabricated story. When others posted articles confirming this crime had actually occurred, it was clear this wasn't a hoax. One of the articles from the 1st of May read, Melinda Vasilyev died of multiple stab wounds. Waterloo Regional Police Service officers found the 22-year-old's body in the early hours of April the 28th in her Kitchener home on Country Hill Drive. The man who has been charged with her second-degree murder is 24-year-old Aga Mohsin Hassan from Hamilton. Only a few hours after the incident, his 2016 black Honda HR-V crossed the Peace Bridge into Buffalo. The last place he was seen was in a Walmart parking lot in Pennsylvania, where he was observed taking a license plate off a vehicle to put on his own, said Inspector Mike Hafner at a press conference Monday. Investigators are working with all US law enforcement agencies, including Homeland Security, Hafner said. We believe Aga Hassan is responsible for Melinda Vasilyev's death, and as such, there's a Canada-wide warrant for his arrest. Hassan and Vasilyev had been in a relationship for about 1 year. Less than a month before her death, on April 3rd, Hassan had been charged with break and enter into Vasilyev's residence and 2 counts of assault. Ms. Vasilyev was not a victim to those assaults, said Hafner. Hassan was not allowed to enter Waterloo region or have contact with Vasilyev. For not obeying these court orders, he was charged with breach recognizance. Since police began their investigation on April the 28th, they've completed canvassing the neighbourhood and collecting evidence. They've also conducted numerous interviews, including with people in Hamilton, and determined the type of car Hassan drove and his license plate number. With that knowledge, they contacted border officials, but Hassan had already crossed over to the US. All Hafner could say about who Vasilyev was is that she had recently moved to the area. Online, it's a different story. Melinda was such a beautiful woman and didn't deserve any of this, wrote Tia Wojtekska, who started a GoFundMe page to raise money for Vasilyev's family. We want to remember her for all she was. She was kind, gentle, pure and sweet. For all who knew her, she had such an uplifting personality and made everyone around her happy. In 2 days, 200 people have raised more than $14,000 for funeral and other costs. My heart hurts and my head can't fathom the loss of your beautiful smile, wrote Vasilyev's friend Julia Rubasha on Facebook. You were an amazing human and I am honoured to say I knew you. After learning that Aga really was wanted for his ex-girlfriend's murder and that he had gone on the run to the US, so many people reported the post to the Waterloo police within a few hours that Redditors stated as soon as they mentioned why they were calling, the responder asked if it was about the Reddit post. Comments on the post were a little mixed. Some offered Aga advice, telling him to get a lawyer and turn himself in, and suggesting he get his wounds examined by an expert to prove they were from self-defense. Some even tried to make him feel better about what he'd done, such as this one. Well, if OP is honest, it was clearly self-defense. Also, if OP reads this, it does suck. Think for a moment though, if you had been killed, how would Melinda take it? Is she as strong as you? Weaker? What would her family think of her? Could she deal with it? You wish you would have just accepted your fate, but then what fate would you have left Melinda to? A terrible one. It sucks for everyone involved, but that's where we are. But you may have saved her all the pain you're in. If you're truly innocent, if it was self-defense, my heart goes out to you, and her, and everyone connected. This comment is absolutely insane. It's one thing showing any level of empathy to a man who, in the absolute best case scenario, murdered his ex-girlfriend in retaliation to her threatening him with a knife, but it's something else to talk like he did her a favour in that situation. Even if the incident went down exactly as Aga described it, he still didn't really kill her in self-defense. As I said before, there is no justifying her threatening him with a knife in the first place, but she didn't actually stab him. He was injured by grabbing the knife with his hands. If she did stab him, and he retaliated by stabbing her back and it ended up killing her, then you could argue it was self-defense. But that's not what happened, by Aga's own admission. A couple of other commenters even said things like, "I'm sorry for your loss," as if he didn't cause that loss by literally murdering her. Thankfully, most of the comments were a lot more reasonable and saw the situation for what it was. Here's an example. This post sounds and looks manipulative. It just reeks of f***ed-up intent. First of all, he has had physical altercations in the past with people who knew this girl. This seems like a major red flag for one. He was literally charged for breaking and entering and assault 3 weeks before her murder, pertaining to that incident. Second of all, who posts on Reddit out of the blue like this unless he was trying to set up a story? I don't know what he thinks he is going to accomplish. Murder is murder. If it's a troll, then that is just messed up, but still worth investigating, I would think. We have lost a life, a really good one from the sounds of it, and as a Canadian, I want to see every single thing possible to be done to bring this case to justice, including having to figure whether this user is a troll or the actual perpetrator. His story is strange and doesn't add up. Yes, arguments get heated, but it seems like just the way things are, things were pretty tense and angry and could have easily escalated. And that he has the premeditated intent to commit violence. But that is just speculation. We cannot prosecute the guy and put a target on his back as civilians, as people on a social media platform. I am all for the Canadian legal system doing what it has to do, and I think they should investigate this to the max if they can. They are the best to handle this. They will do the research and make the right call, whether his story is true or whether he did intend to kill her. Finally, even if an argument got escalated and the girl grabbed a knife, the news says she died of multiple stab wounds. If this was an act of defense, how did he end up stabbing her so many times? Also, that is still pretty shady as f***. Did he try to run away? Did he try to disarm her? They were alone in an apartment. He could have run to the door and left. Chances are he is taller and stronger too. There are so many ways to deal with escalated arguments like this. Multiple stab wounds just sound shady as f***. There was some debate over whether Aga had actually intended to murder Melinda, in the Reddit comments and in articles covering the case. In the final paragraph of his post, he said, "I'm reading the news and they are claiming it was targeted, or an act of terrorism. Why would I buy her roses that night if I was planning on killing her? I didn't even go home that night. I always have a passport in the car and decided to just get away for a few days before turning myself in or myself. If any of it was planned, I would have taken my stuff. I would have took cash. I'm in the United States with $200, no clean clothes, nothing. I didn't intend on any of it. It was out of fear and protecting myself alongside shock. I'm sorry to everyone, especially Melinda's family. I know it will not be accepted, but no, I didn't mean anything bad to happen that night when I went there. Rest in peace, my beautiful. I hope you forgive me in the afterlife. Aga also shared an Imgur album full of photos of him and Melinda, with captions like, "What I'd do to get this one more time," and "She was my energy when my own was gone." He even had the audacity to leave a message to her friend and roommate Anna, quote, "Honestly, Anna, I met you twice, so I don't know you. After she moved in with you, she started acting differently and aggressive. I don't know what you put in her head. I'm not blaming you, but I just wish you'd have been a better friend to her. She used to show me texts of you telling her, 'Screw your boyfriend, let's go out and club.' I'm not saying it was your fault for the initial April breakup, but I know you had something to do with it. Everything else that followed was unfortunate. All I'm saying is life was better without you. Take care." What a way to rub salt in the wound after Aga literally just killed Anna's friend. Despite him saying he isn't blaming her, I think he is subtly trying to make her feel like it's partly her fault, implying that everything was perfect until she moved in with Melinda. In reality, Anna was probably a good friend who saw Aga for what he was and tried to convince Melinda she was better off without him. On the 12th of July, over 10 weeks after Melinda's death, Aga was finally arrested after an unrelated traffic stop in San Antonio, Texas. Police believed he was attempting to reach the Mexican border. So despite Aga insisting in the Reddit post that he was not trying to escape the crime, that's exactly what he did. It doesn't sound like he had any intention of turning himself in. The trial wasn't until 6 years later. I have no idea why it took so long. Aga maintained that the murder was self-defense, claiming that after Melinda attacked him, he stabbed her twice, then blacked out. He insisted he didn't intend to kill her, and after days of being pretty quiet while on the witness stand, he broke down, saying, "I should be in jail for a very long time, but I swear to God, I lost control. Convict me for life, I don't care, but I blacked out. Don't try to say I did this in my right mind. I killed her, yes. I didn't do this out of anger. I didn't do this because we didn't get back together. It happened because I was an idiot. It's all just hitting me." The judge told the jury to consider whether they believed Melinda had provoked Aga and if he was in a state of mind to commit murder. If they disagreed with the latter, they must find him not guilty of second-degree murder. They could return one of 3 verdicts: not guilty of second-degree murder but guilty of manslaughter, or guilty of second-degree murder. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder and he was sentenced to life in prison. The earliest he will be eligible for parole is in 2033, when he'll be 41 years old. The information revealed at the trial casts a lot of doubt on the version of events Aga told in the Reddit post. He testified that Melinda had cut him on his hand and wrist, but that's not exactly consistent with the post, in which he claimed, quote, "I tried grabbing the knife but ended up cutting my hands." In reality, I highly doubt Melinda even threatened him with a knife, and it turns out she had been stabbed 47 times, including 27 to the neck and 6 to her chest. Aga had even used 2 separate knives. 3 of the wounds were caused by a serrated knife, and the rest were with a different knife. Both of these knives were found in Melinda's apartment. You don't stab someone 47 times with 2 different knives in self-defense. That was intentional murder. I don't believe Aga's narrative that Melinda went crazy after finding out he had been involved with other women after they broke up. The prosecution argued that he murdered her out of anger because she refused to get back together with him. That's entirely possible. Alternatively, I wonder if Aga didn't totally make up the conversation about what happened after the breakup, but it was actually Melinda that admitted to being involved with another man, and that's what caused him to fly into a fit of rage and murder her. Although she didn't seem keen on him going over that night, she did eventually accept, likely knowing he would try to get back with her. Considering the restraining order preventing him from going anywhere near her, I'm not sure she would have let him visit her just to tell him again that she didn't want to be in a relationship with him. Someone as cunning and manipulative as Aga seems to be would know exactly how to twist a situation and say the right things to convince Melinda to give him another chance. He'd probably already started before this day. It sounds like her family and friends all hated him, and Anna and her boyfriend certainly would have discouraged her from meeting him again just to tell him she didn't want to get back with him. So I think it's more plausible that she was manipulated into giving him another chance. Either way, there is no doubt in my mind that Aga intended to kill Melinda, even if it wasn't planned before he arrived at her apartment. It's depressing to think that he could get out of prison in as little as 9 years from now. He took Melinda's whole life from her, and when he's released, he'll still get to live half of his. I'll end the video with this advice. If you're a woman who is planning to break up with your male partner, especially if you've ever noticed any signs of violence from him, break up with him in public. Do not do it in the middle of a heated argument at home. Don't agree to go to a private place after to talk things through. And don't ever be in a situation where you're alone with him after the breakup. It might sound harsh, but look at how many women have been murdered in this way and tell me it's worth taking the risk. Your life is much more important than a man's feelings. In June 2020, a Reddit user made a post asking for help after his mother disappeared. Other users offered suggestions and words of support. Little did they know that this would turn out to be the most shocking event to ever occur on the Argentina subreddit. Let's investigate. On the 16th of June 2020, a Reddit user by the name of Norom posted a photo on the Argentina subreddit with the title, "Urgent, I need help please. We are from BSAS Zona Oeste, Castelar, Barrio San Juan." The photo was of a middle-aged woman wearing a pink top with text underneath stating that her name was Emma Rosario Colk and that she had been missing since the 12th of June. A phone number was added with the comment, "All information will be appreciated." A comment on the post by OP explained that Emma had gone out to the shop with her documents, wallet and cell phone, wearing the same clothes as in the photo, and she had never returned. Other users left words of support, expressed their hope that she would be found, and most importantly, gave suggestions on how OP could spread the word and some tips that may help locate her. For example, people suggested sharing the photo in local Facebook groups and on Twitter, tagging local journalists and anyone with a significant following that might be willing to help get more eyes on this case. Others told OP to check Google Maps if he had access to her Google account, as that would show her route over the last few days, to ask for CCTV footage from the shop she went to confirm she actually made it there, and to request her phone company give police data on her last movements from her phone. OP stated he had been to the shop but hadn't asked for CCTV footage yet, but unfortunately he believed her phone had been turned off for the last few days, so it would have been impossible to find her through any method that required her phone to have been on while she was missing. A couple of days after the original post, OP commented the following, translated from Spanish, so please excuse the slight grammatical errors. "Good evening everyone, thank you for helping me spread the word about what happened. I was able to access the Google account, the Facebook account, and together with the police, we were able to make several inquiries and summon many people to testify. During the last hours, we were looking for all the hospitals in the West Zone, wallpapering everything. We looked for all the security cameras of the houses in the area to see if we can find her. So far, there is no news from my mother, but we were able to find out that she had another job, and we are trying to contact her employer to see if they had any news. Thank you very much to everyone for the support, and I will be telling you day by day what is happening. This is the first time that OP revealed that the missing woman was actually his mother, which makes this situation even sadder. It's interesting that he states in the comment that they found out she had another job, implying that they were aware of her main job, but that she had never mentioned a second. Assuming this isn't a translation error, this is really bizarre. OP lived with his mother, they were presumably relatively close, so how on earth could she have another job that he had no idea about, and why would she hide that from him? While we now have answers to most of the questions you might currently have about this case, unfortunately this is one I still haven't found an explanation for. Users on the Argentina subreddit continue to support OP as best they could, sharing the post elsewhere, and the mods even pinned the post to give it more exposure. As the days passed though, the chances of Emma being found alive and well plummeted. Everyone knows that the first 24 hours a person is missing is the most crucial time to act. If someone has been kidnapped, 24 hours is easily enough time for them to have been taken to a remote location without arousing suspicion. If the public isn't looking for a person, no one is going to notice anything amiss. If the plan is to murder someone, 24 hours is easily enough time to do this and dispose of the evidence. If a person voluntarily disappears, 24 hours is enough time for them to leave the country. If they somehow accidentally got lost, 24 hours is enough time for them to run into some danger, become injured, and end up in a situation that means that they won't be found before it's too late. Emma went missing on the 12th, and her son didn't create this post until the 16th, 4 days later. It's not like all hope was lost at this point, but the crucial window had passed, and it was looking increasingly unlikely that this story would have a happy ending. We don't know for sure that OP didn't post about the disappearance elsewhere online or take other steps before they posted on Reddit, but later information suggested that he hadn't reported it to the police straight away, so one might question whether he actually wanted his mother to be found. On the 21st of June, 5 days after OP's Reddit post, local news articles revealed a tragic and shocking update. Emma had been found murdered. As I said, her death was not the news that anyone wanted, but considering she'd been missing without a trace for 9 whole days, it seemed highly unlikely that she was still alive. No one predicted what had actually happened to her though. According to Unmedia and Moron.com, horror invaded the Barrio San Juan de Castellar. This Saturday, the police discovered the lifeless body of Emma Rosario Colk, 49 years old, who had been intensively searched for since Friday, June the 12th. According to the first reports, she was murdered with a knife and buried in the garden of her house. Her 20-year-old son was taken into custody. The woman's body was found this afternoon in a house located at 4000 Eduardo Cogliate, almost on the corner of Alberto Casares. The youngest of her 3 children, with whom she lived, had filed a complaint on Monday, June the 15th for whereabouts investigation at the 3rd police station in Castellar because she had not returned to his home since that Friday. The young man described that his mother was 49 years old, 1.58 metres tall, of medium physical build, dark complexion, and wavy black hair at the shoulders. According to sources, police personnel began the search but could not find Colk's whereabouts. Investigators became suspicious of the woman's inner circle, and prosecutor Walter Leguizamo, in charge of the case, ordered a search of her home this afternoon. In this way, the scientific police verified that the victim's body had been buried on the side of the building. At first glance, the officers observed that the woman had received 3 stab wounds to the head and body. The prosecutor's office ordered the apprehension of Kolk's youngest son as a suspect of having committed matricide, and that the corresponding autopsy be carried out to corroborate the date and cause of death. This Sunday, he will be investigated for the crime of homicide aggravated by the link. "We are in the first stages of the investigation. The fact is very recent," a spokesman said. "But what transpired so far from the police report is that the young man entered into contradictions and would have finally admitted the crime to the police." Other sources reported that Emma's youngest son, Daniel, who admitted to murdering her, had mental health problems, and when he was questioned by the police, he spontaneously recounted that on the day of his mother's disappearance, he remembered an unnamed man sitting at the table talking to her. He then heard noises before the pair began arguing, prompting him to peek into the room, at which point the man shouted at him, "Don't say anything or I'll kill you." Rather than call the police, he decided to sit back in front of his computer and continue playing on it, and even though he heard strange movements in the other room, he implied he thought nothing of it. I wasn't able to find any further information about Daniel's mental health problems, but even taking that into consideration, it's quite unbelievable that he would not make any attempt to help his mother, and that he would conveniently forget this entire event ever happened until the police showed up to search the house. Daniel was the one to report his mother missing 3 days after she disappeared, and he acted like he had no idea what could have possibly happened to her. It wasn't until the police went out to the garden, noticed an area that looked like it had been recently dug up, and stated that they were going to conduct a forensic examination that Daniel finally confessed that he had murdered Emma and buried her in that spot. He was immediately arrested, though at the time of these news reports, no one had any idea why he would commit such a heinous crime against his own mother. It didn't take long for the news to spread to the Argentina subreddit, and users who had commented on the initial post were horrified to realise that not only might they have communicated with a murderer, but they potentially even helped him to cover up the crime. Some of the advice they had given him, that they thought was to help an innocent son locate his mother, was perhaps unknowingly tipping him off about what evidence he should destroy and how he could make it look like she was somewhere else other than 6 feet under in her back garden. After seeing the news articles, a couple of users were clearly suspicious and commented on the original post, implying that OP was in fact Daniel, but he denied it and claimed he was Daniel's brother. In response to a comment saying, "Dude, I don't understand anything," he said, "Apparently it was my brother, that's what the police say." Another comment read, "By any chance, are you 20 years old?" He replied, 25, and then confirmed again that Daniel was his brother. This causes some confusion because no one actually seemed to know for sure if OP was Daniel, the murderer, or one of his brothers. In a comment on an unrelated post sometime before Emma's disappearance, OP had stated that they were 19. This was less than a year ago, which would mean at the time of the disappearance, they were either 19 or 20, which was Daniel's age. So either OP was lying when he said he was 19, or he definitely wasn't 25 in 2020. Another interesting thing to note is that in February 2020, just 4 months before Emma's murder, OP commented the following in response to a comment on a post on the Argentina subreddit about the Umbanda culture. "I see and feel the spirits in places if I concentrate a little and let myself go. My recommendation, get away from that world now that you can. Once inside, it is difficult to leave, and it is dangerous people who are very involved." The commenter replied with, "What are these experiences for? Were you into it? I don't think that because you are too in touch with these people, you have those visions, unless you have been in the rituals." And OP followed up with, "On the contrary, because I had those visions, which is not really that I see it clearly, more than anything they are silhouettes of people and I feel them, I started to investigate. I met people who were very involved and they explained the subject to me well. I spent 2 years frequenting those people until I realised that it was not for me and I moved away. I saw a lot of things that I honestly wouldn't want to repeat again. It's interesting that so soon before OP's mother was murdered, they were talking about these hallucinations they'd had, especially considering that Daniel reportedly had some unspecified mental health problems. Of course, it's possible that Daniel wasn't the only son of Emma's to suffer with their mental health, so this is by no means proof that OP is Daniel, but it is a potentially noteworthy coincidence. The main piece of information that makes it very unlikely that OP is Daniel is that he commented on the original post after Daniel had reportedly been arrested. He also resurfaced in 2022 after he was tagged in a comment about this story, simply replying with, "I'm famous, Pope." Less than a month later, users on the Argentina subreddit were discussing this event again, and he commented, "FUA high fans." One user responded, "I don't know if I'm a fan, but it's still rare that a user who posts often and attracts a lot of attention also draws attention that he stops publishing from one day to the next." OP replied, "Dude, look, maybe he lost his phone or his account, or maybe he lost interest. People talk so much bullshit for the sake of talking. They say I'm a murderer, and I've already denied that shit so many times." I don't know if that's just a bad translation or what, but I really don't know what or who he's referring to when he says he lost his phone or his account, or maybe he lost interest. Another user further up the thread stated that the Norom Norom account was created by Daniel, but that his brother was the one who posted about the disappearance. I guess this would make sense, as while not impossible, it would be unlikely that Daniel would be able to access his Reddit account while in police custody. Two different people having access to the account would explain why there were comments from this account shortly before the murder where OP said they were 19, then later they said they were 25. However, I wasn't actually able to find any updates on this case since June 2020 when it was initially reported that Emma had been murdered and Daniel had confessed. Obviously, I don't live in Argentina, nor do I speak Spanish, so it was a little difficult for me to research this case in general, but I did search quite extensively, not only for more recent articles, but also for any updates on Reddit, and found nothing to confirm what happened to Daniel. This is strange because although it seems that this was never a huge case in Argentina, let alone internationally, you'd think it would have made waves in the local area and that local news sources would have continued to report on it. While the only conclusion we can draw is that Daniel was responsible for the murder, we don't even know this for sure without further confirmation. Sure, he confessed at the time, but we have no idea if he was ever convicted of the crime or if the police even ended up charging him. Especially considering he reportedly suffered with mental health problems, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that he falsely confessed to the murder but didn't actually commit it. If that's the case, there's a chance that police decided not to charge him and just quietly let him go, but that would mean that the real murderer would still be on the loose, which would surely be a sensational enough story for newspapers to continue reporting on. I did notice on Reddit and in the comments on a YouTube video about this case as it was unfolding that some people in the local area apparently suspect that one of the older brothers was responsible for the murder and they framed Daniel. None of the comments elaborated on this too much, so I'm not sure what makes people think that, but it is interesting to me that no one reported Emma missing until 3 days after she disappeared or was murdered. Daniel contacted the police on the 15th, but neither of her other sons, who both also lived with her, bothered to do so before this. Furthermore, one of the articles discussing the case ended with the following sentence. The complaint for the whereabouts of another of her sons, aged 25, had been filed. So her 25-year-old son, who the Norom Norom user was seemingly claiming to be, was nowhere to be found for an unspecified length of time after the police arrived at their home and arrested Daniel, even though he was commenting on the Reddit post the day these articles were published. This doesn't necessarily mean that he had anything to do with it. It's possible that he wasn't aware of what happened until after, and that he contacted police himself after he found out, but it's all just very odd. If my mum went to the shop and just didn't come back, I certainly wouldn't wait 3 days to report her missing, and there'd be no way that police wouldn't know where I was at any given time. I'd ensure they always had a way to contact me instantly in case they had any updates. After these two out-of-the-blue comments in 2022, no one heard a peep from the Norom account until 19 days ago at the time of writing this script, when a few more comments were posted with a claim that makes this whole situation even more baffling. On the 14th of December 2023, there was a post on the Argentina subreddit asking, "How good/bad is the law of the Argentinian sub?" One user tagged Norom stating that he, quote, "killed his old woman and buried her in the yard of his house." Within literally 1 minute, Norom replied, "I'm going to eat your mum at any moment." Here's the conversation that ensued, beginning with the other user replying to Norom. "I'm seriously concerned that your account hasn't been active in a year and suddenly someone names you and you literally show up a minute later. You should be rotting in jail. I don't know what you're doing on Reddit. I'm worried that you're such an idiot that instead of asking, you accept everything Dross says, a poor wretch who lies to have views. But I'm more worried that you think I showed up after a year, when what you say about it was more than 2 years ago, so not even your notion of time is right, and what I'm absolutely worried about is that I'm going to be your stepfather on top of it." The news came out in a lot of media at the time, murderous son of a bitch. User Norom came out, "No, clearly not. Why? Because clearly I'm not the same guy you're talking about. Why? Because this is my account, and the fact that I lent it willingly to the kid to ask here doesn't mean that it was me. But you're so stupid and from what it looks so rare that you only talk without knowing. But don't worry, I'm going to give you a good education, the one your dad never gave you. Tell him that I believe you. What are you doing hanging out with murderers? A murderer is not a murderer until the day he murders, you know. Therefore, you are accusing me and judging me for something that could happen to anyone. Simple. But well, I already told you. This class and more I am going to give you in the future with the belt in my hand after your mum. I see that reading comprehension is not your forte, and neither is education. The one who lacks reading comprehension is clearly you, and education too. If not reread the conversation, just what I wanted to give you understand is that maybe tomorrow your best friend suffers from some disorder, some psychological problem, or simply goes crazy, kills someone, you don't know. You're still your best friend. Then after 2 weeks you find out. Your friend is in jail and stupid people like you are going to ask you, what were you doing hanging out with murderers? I reiterate, my fault is not. I didn't know. I am not sincerely interested in what they think about the subject. That's why I have the impudence to appear, make jokes, and respond to fools like you when I have free time. I didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter. But if I have to give you an explanation like that, lose your thanks. Hopefully one day you'll activate your brain. I don't want to use the belt to activate it. Let's be a happy family. A little bit altered, isn't it? You paint a touch. Psycho. Corrupted. I laugh at the kid. It's just that it's tedious to have to explain something that explains itself. Do you know what's going on? We're in Argentina. Your friend, or whoever he is, was a disgusting person. We are very used to there being disgusting, sick people everywhere, and they just come out like that. That is to say, you see it as something logical, but it is not logical that an account that does not respond never suddenly appears and begins to speak after a police event has occurred. Or was it the filthy little sufferer in question? Or there was another story. Apart from that, the guy who wants to give an explanation, that is, you, does it by throwing shit from the first comment, and it makes you think you're the sick, filthy son of 1,000 bitches. Do you understand? Now, if you're not the filthy sick one, you don't have to go around feeling bad. I don't feel bad, nor am I interested. I left work, I got a notification to my Google account and I said, let's break the eggs for a while. Don't throw shit either, I just warned my future stepson that he has to reconsider a little. Prior to these comments, the most plausible explanation seemed to be that the Norom account was created by Daniel. One of his brothers used it to post on the Argentina subreddit about their missing mother. Then after Daniel confessed, the brother who had made the original post was the only person with access to the account. Now all of a sudden, whoever is behind this account is claiming to have been Daniel's best friend at the time of the murder, and makes no mention of either of his brothers ever using the account. He seems to be implying that it was Daniel who posted about his mother in the first place, but it's hard to know for sure with the potentially slightly questionable translation. This whole story is so inconsistent, and honestly I'm baffled at this point. It just doesn't make sense. If one of Emma's sons was the original creator of the account, why wouldn't they themselves have posted about the disappearance, rather than giving their account to one of their brothers to post instead? The original creator was clearly familiar with Reddit, and you'd assume if you have to lend your account to someone that they don't have their own account and are less familiar, so why wouldn't you post yourself? The same logic applies if the account always belonged to Daniel's best friend, as they're now claiming. Why lend your account to someone who is presumably less familiar with Reddit than you, when you could just post on their behalf, or get them to create an account which takes literally 30 seconds and can be done using a throwaway email? With the most recent version of events from the best friend, it seems that up to 3 different people had access to this account. The best friend, who claims to own the account, Daniel, and one of Daniel's brothers. This would mean way more hassle than creating a new account specifically for whoever posted about the disappearance. It's kind of strange in itself that whoever uses the account now hasn't just created a new one. They seemed annoyed that people keep tagging them and assuming that they are Daniel. You'd think 3.5 years later they would have given up explaining themselves and decided to start afresh. I really have no idea what's going on here. I don't know who created the account, who posted about Emma's disappearance, and who's using it now. I don't know if Daniel is currently in prison for his mother's murder, or if he even murdered her in the first place. I don't know if Daniel ever had access to this account, or if he's the one who posted the most recent comments, if for whatever reason he was acquitted of the murder. Not to mention the possibility that he could have been framed by one of his older brothers, and if it was him who posted about the disappearance, maybe Reddit users were interacting with the murderer all along. The version of events that is most commonly recounted on the Argentina subreddit, and occasionally elsewhere, is that a Reddit user posted about his mother's disappearance, and it turned out he murdered her. If that was the case, this story would be much simpler, albeit no less shocking, but there's clearly much more to this whole situation that has ensued on Reddit. If anyone watching this video lives in Argentina, particularly in the area this happened, or even if you speak Spanish and don't have to rely on Google Translate like me, please let me know if you can find any more information, or if you can clear any of the confusion up, because I'm baffled but way too invested at this point to just forget about it. By all means, do your own research, but please don't attempt to contact Norom on Reddit. As suspicious as this whole situation is, we really don't know who is behind the account or if they have anything to do with the murder. And regardless, their story keeps changing, so you probably wouldn't gain any credible information by asking them anyway. Reddit is full of bizarre and terrifying posts. I have a series, Disturbing Reddit Posts, that explores some of these. I thought the one we'll cover today deserved its own video though, as it's quite long and extremely unsettling. Let's investigate. The story of this Reddit user begins in September 2017 when she posted on the incest subreddit explaining that she had fallen in love with her dad. I'm sure you can already tell that this is going to be a pretty messed up tale, but in the first half of the post I forgot for a moment where this was heading, and I sympathised with her as it sounds like she hasn't exactly had the easiest life, even though she acknowledges she is relatively privileged. To summarise, OP is a trans woman who from a young age always had more stereotypically feminine interests. Her parents divorced when she was born because her father cheated, so she lived with her mother and saw her father twice a week, on weekends and during summer holidays. She began transitioning shortly after turning 13 and described high school as awful, hence she switched to a different school for a new start after her transition. Some of her fellow students at the time were initially interested in her, but that soon changed when they discovered she was trans, and it sounds like this made her feel quite lonely. She met her first and only real boyfriend on the Traps subreddit, which the About section describes as for posting photos and videos of young and beautiful traps and femboys. She doesn't at any point state her age. It is a not safe for work subreddit, so I would hope that she was at least 18, but it's not really clear at this point, as she only refers to herself as a teenager. Her boyfriend lived a long way away and was much older. He made her feel comfortable with her identity, supported her and helped her through a dark time, and it wasn't long before their communication took a mature turn. She described him as very dominating, and although they often spoke about meeting or even her living with him, it doesn't sound like they ever met. It can be inferred that she was taken advantage of by him, and she eventually found out that he was married and had kids. She was heartbroken, but eventually forgave him, and the affair continued until he became very paranoid and worried that she would tell his wife, and so cut all contact, which seemed to affect her significantly. OP describes her dad as very manly and said she admired him for it. She implies that he was a good father and accepted her for who she was. One night, she bent down to pick up the dog bowl and claims she caught her father staring at her, quote, not in a fatherly way. Prior to this, she had a bit of a crush on him, but the look he gave her that night took her feelings to a whole other level, and she couldn't stop thinking about him in an explicit way, and said she thought about him as a boyfriend and not a dad, doing various chores around the house to play the housewife role. One day, she decided to snoop on her dad's laptop and found a lot of adult content featuring trans women, and this only strengthened what seemed like her delusion that something might happen between them. She said from then she became obsessed with the idea of having certain contact with him. She concluded the post by asking for advice on how to proceed, saying that she had her reservations but wanted to test the waters and see how he reacted. At this point, I still have some level of sympathy for OP. As I've said in past videos that centre around other paraphilias, people don't choose them, they can't help it, what matters is how they choose to behave. It seems very likely that OP's experience with the older married man caused lasting psychological damage, and I wouldn't be surprised if that partly explains her misguided feelings towards her father. Had this been posted on a different subreddit, I imagine most users would have tried to talk some sense into her and highlighted the many problems with this post, but of course this is r/incest, and so they all encouraged her and gave her tips on how to escalate the situation. Thankfully, in an update post, it seemed that OP had gained some perspective and realised she was thinking irrationally before, as she said that although she still has crazy emotional days sometimes, she had decided that this fantasy should just remain a fantasy, because she was dependent on her parents, loved her family, and thought that if she pushed something, people would get hurt and her relationship with her dad would be destroyed. She acknowledged that her past relationship had influenced her current mindset and went on to answer some of the questions she'd been asked after the first post. Most of it doesn't really further the plot, so I'll leave it out for now. The next update was 8 months later, and after one step forward, it was a sign of 2 steps back. OP's hormone replacement therapy had been increased, and while she had experienced some of the desired physical changes, she was often very emotional and had also suffered some negative physical consequences, like the inability to use certain body parts. It was clear that she had gone back on her decision to keep the fantasy as a fantasy when she said, Now I'm worried that it will be weird that I can't be what my dad wants. She went on to talk about the type of adult content that she found on her dad's laptop and expressed concern that she didn't fit his type. She acknowledged that it's probably a crazy thought and all this might be in her head, but then said that the tension between them had been building and that the more feminine she looked, the more he seemed to change around her, leading to her feeling like they were in a relationship. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels quite uncomfortable hearing all this, but at the same time it's kind of fascinating from a psychological standpoint to get such a detailed description of her thoughts and feelings. Some of it's quite graphic, so I can't go into too much detail here, but through the occasional moments of clarity, it seems like she's totally fixated on the idea of being in a relationship with and having inappropriate contact with her dad. We only hear her side of the story, so who knows if these feelings are reciprocated, I hope not, or if her perception of these moments where she believes her dad is hinting that he does feel the same are totally warped. It's also worth noting that we still have no idea how old OP was at the time of these posts. In the last update, she had mentioned that her mum had gone through her stuff and forced her to show her phone one night, and she ended up seeing things she wasn't supposed to, some adult content that was of a deviant nature, it sounds. As a result, her mum took the locks off her door, implying that she is still quite young, as most parents wouldn't take such actions if their daughter was an adult over the age of 18, though it is hard to say for sure as every family is different. In the next post, OP describes her first encounter with a man. It's a very long and extremely graphic post. She describes everything that happened in detail, and honestly it's kinda sad. Overall, she enjoyed the experience, but said at first she felt sad and scared. It sounds like she didn't quite anticipate how intense and rough the situation would be, and the man also filmed her without asking for her permission first. It sounds like he was quite a lot older too, as they went out for dinner after and he told the waiter she was his son who was trying to be a girl. She also revealed at the end that, like her first boyfriend, he was married with kids. She is clearly into being dominated and humiliated, so she was mostly into it, but honestly it just sounds like a lot for her first ever encounter of that kind. The next and final post OP made is where things took an even darker turn. It was titled, "MTF Trans Girl, I finally got the courage to be with my dad." At this point, OP had become friends with the man that she had her first encounter with, and he'd been encouraging her to dress and act more boldly. He even posed as her dad so she could get a tattoo, which is further confirmation that she is under the age of 18. He had been encouraging her to be more bold around her dad. It honestly sounds like he was grooming her overall. One weekend, shortly after OP's dad had broken up with his girlfriend, he was getting drunk and OP was bringing him drinks. She says she likes playing the housewife role and describes herself as kind of like his girlfriend. Quote, "I'm usually really good about restraining myself and being careful, but something in me just snapped and I said, oh well. I found myself getting worked up just thinking about it. It's seriously been, a year since I started thinking about this. I brought him beer after beer and even made him a vodka mixed drink or two. He's offered to let me drink, but I never wanted to mess with it too much because of my medication and therapy, so I just keep bringing him what he wanted. We usually hang out on the couch and just talk and relax like every single weekend. He started to vent to me about his girlfriend for the first time ever and how it just wasn't working out, and I kept saying how he deserved better and that he was a good guy. I guess that was me just projecting myself. Anyway, he asked me about my life, and I told him that I didn't have a real boyfriend and that the only guy I was talking to suggested I find the right person for me. I could tell he was pretty drunk and pretty emotional, so I told him he should slow down and I offered to get him water, but he wanted one more beer. I guess he had taken interest in my story because he thought I was single and didn't know that I had anyone in my life. My friend kept texting me and I don't know what it is, but finally I just said screw it and started to flirt with my dad, like harder than ever before. I was already just wearing a tank top, so I did what any crazy trans girl might do and I told my dad I thought he was handsome and that any girl should like him. And I think he took it sincerely as flattery. And he started talking about how I've blossomed into an amazing young woman and how I stand out so much now, and I felt really flush instantly. It was different hearing my dad talk about me than my online friend. I told him how I admired him and how strong and manly he was, and how sad I was about Mum and my last girlfriend. I started getting closer to him until I was next to him and cuddling on him. That's not at all unusual, but tonight I just felt the right spark. I was playing the most cute I could, nuzzling him and looking at him. I think he could see I was being weird, but he was also really drunk, so he just put his hand around me. I don't think he knew what to do. I didn't know myself if I should make the first move, but I did anyway. I started to put my right hand on his thigh. I thought maybe for a second that I should stop, but I can't control myself sometimes, and this was one of those times. His head was bobbing from the beers, but I could tell he started to figure it out. I didn't know what to do. The excitement wore off, and I was starting to feel more nervous than anything, but I had already went so far. You have no idea how much my heart was pumping. To summarise the next part, Opie's hand was in a place it shouldn't have been, and after a moment, her dad moved it away and pulled back, asking what she was doing, to which she replied she was getting cozy. She moved her hand back and he didn't react straight away. Maybe a minute later, he pushed her away again and asked what she was doing, in a more firm way this time. She moved her hand back and he asked her why she was doing it. She said it was because he was stressed and that she wanted to help. He told her to go to bed and said she shouldn't be doing it, that he was going to hell, but he didn't move her hand this time, for a little while at least. She tried to find the words to tell him how she felt, but couldn't, and instead just kissed him, before telling him she was in love with him. He eventually got up, told OP to calm down, and said he was drunk and going through a lot, to which she responded that it was okay and she just wanted to make him feel good. At this point, she basically forced herself on him, quote, "I didn't want him to have enough time to tell me to stop." And I'm sure you can guess what happened next. OP claims that he eventually got into it, but let's not get this situation twisted. She got her dad drunk and assaulted him. Quote, "He looked at me and asked me what he had done. His face looked like he had killed someone. I grabbed his arms and told him it was okay, that I wanted this, and that he wanted this, and that nothing had changed, that I did it for us. And I know it was an awful time, but I started to cry and tell him how much I loved him. He pulled back and said that we need to think about what just happened, and that we should talk when we're both clear, and that he needs to sleep and clear his head. And like a zombie, he pushed me off him and went to go to bed. I know there is a real connection. I know he let it out, but I think I pushed too hard and now he's distant. We haven't talked about it again and it's been a while now. I can't ignore it and I don't know what to do." Thankfully, the comments on this post were much more rational than those on OP's first post, and everyone was calling her out for assaulting her dad. The lack of self-awareness from OP is actually baffling and very concerning. She replied to one of the comments justifying what had happened by saying he didn't actually stop her, as if him not physically pushing her off him was the same as him consenting. Various other commenters were making points in an attempt to get her to understand how wrong she was in that situation by highlighting how different it would have been if he did to her exactly what she'd done to him. She eventually deleted the post, presumably because she realised it didn't sound great, to say the least, but I don't think she actually had an epiphany, as the most recent comment, which was the following month, on the post where she described her first encounter with a man, read, "My dad really enjoys our time together now." I don't know, and I'm not sure if I want to know if that means that this situation happened again, and that some kind of messed up relationship beyond the typical father and daughter relationship resulted from this, or if they somehow moved past it and didn't talk about it again. This story is not only horrifying, but it's quite tragic too. Opie acknowledged that she had a relatively privileged upbringing compared to many other trans people, but gender dysphoria itself can be very traumatizing, and the men she got involved with after beginning her transition likely also added to her trauma, and I can't help but wonder if she never experienced any of this, would she have done what she did? That's not me in any way trying to justify it, by the way, just trying to propose a possible explanation, as someone must either be born with these interests or it's shaped by their environment, usually trauma that occurs from a young age. I'm also not for a second suggesting that being trans would mean someone is more likely to be attracted to their parents, but she did mention herself that she thought it might be linked with being trans. Perhaps the initial confusion about her gender identity could have manifested into a less specific confusion about her identity in general. Obviously, this is not applicable to most trans people. Everyone is different and their responses to trauma vary greatly. Of course, OP is totally responsible for her own actions, but I'd also place some of the blame onto users who commented on the first post, encouraging her to escalate the situation and try something with her dad. She strikes me as quite an impressionable person, and they basically gave her the green light, telling her that her dad was obviously into her, and while she seemed to have some doubts at first, in the end she seemed fully convinced that it was what he wanted. Perhaps the situation would have turned out different if she hadn't found herself in an echo chamber, and instead people had tried to talk sense into her, but I guess we'll never know. Regardless, it goes without saying that OP really needs professional help, and she probably should be in prison for what she did. I believe that left unchecked, she will act in a similar way again, and potentially even escalate her behaviour, as she seemed to show no remorse or even understanding that what she did was wrong. Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested on the 2nd of July 2020, and just 2 days prior, Reddit user Maxwell Hill, who has the 14th highest combined karma of all time, seemingly vanished from the internet. This is one of the many coincidences that have led some to wonder if Ghislaine is actually Maxwell Hill, and after seeing some of their posts, I wouldn't be surprised. Let's investigate. Ghislaine Maxwell was born in France in December 1961 and was raised in Oxford, England. Her father was Robert Maxwell, a British former MP, suspected spy, media tycoon and fraudster, who died in November 1991, shortly before huge discrepancies in his company's finances were revealed. I could probably do a whole video on that guy's life and death, which some believe was suspicious. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested. Anyway, following the death of her father, Ghislaine was invited to the US by Jeffrey Epstein, and the pair eventually began a relationship. As you probably know, Jeffrey supposedly took his own life in prison on the 10th of August 2019 after being arrested on federal charges for the trafficking of minors, though there is skepticism surrounding his cause of death. 3 weeks prior, he had been found unconscious in his cell with injuries to his neck. He said he believed his cellmate attacked him, though it was suspected that he had tried to unalive himself. Around the time he died, he wasn't supposed to be alone in his cell, and guards should have been checking on him every 30 minutes. However, his cellmate had been transferred out the day before and no one took his place. The two guards conveniently fell asleep, leaving Jeffrey unattended for around 3 hours, and the two cameras in front of his cell malfunctioned. He'd already been convicted in 2008 of soliciting and procuring a child for inappropriate acts, and numerous other allegations were made against him over the years that suggested he was operating a trafficking ring. It seems that Ghislaine helped him recruit, groom and abuse girls, some as young as 14, and allowed other prominent figures to engage in inappropriate contact with them too. After details about her involvement with Jeffrey emerged in 2016, she kept a low profile and wasn't arrested until the 2nd of July 2020, the day after the FBI obtained a warrant to locate her. On the 29th of December 2021, she was convicted on 5 trafficking related counts, including one of trafficking a minor, and she's due to be sentenced in June this year. On the 12th of March 2006, almost exactly a year after the investigation into Jeffrey began, a Reddit account was created under the name Maxwell Hill, we'll call them Max, and it would go on to become one of the most successful users on the site. They were the first user to ever reach 1 million karma and have since amassed over 15 million karma, meaning they currently have the 12th highest link karma and the 14th highest combined karma of all time, despite being inactive for over a year and a half at this point. They are or were a moderator of the following subreddits: world news, environment, politics, technology, humour, travel, bad cop no donut, cyber laws, enviro action and greed, among others. They were a Reddit celebrity, if such a thing exists. They had articles written about them and made it to #1 on Gizmodo's list of the 25 most viral people on the internet in 2011. With great power comes great responsibility though, and Max seemed more interested in their own content than actually running the subreddits they moderated. They were partly responsible for technology and politics being removed as default subreddits, as rather than do their mod job properly, they decided to rapidly add and remove a number of moderators, notably bringing back a controversial mod who was described as poisonous rot that makes any team operate in a negative environment. This was after they had resorted to filtering out all posts with certain keywords, including Maxwell Hill, though Max was still able to make posts with those words. It's worth noting that some users have claimed that they weren't able to block Max and that their posts still showed up if they tried to hide them, though I can't verify that. When it became clear that the mods of technology were not working together for the sake of the community, the admins removed it from the defaults until, quote, "you can manage to look past your petty squabbles, add new moderators, and function as a team." Furthermore, Max was accused of deleting posts they disagreed with, banning people for criticising them, even on subreddits they didn't moderate, and I even found a couple of doxing allegations. Max posted so often on subs like World News that they controlled most of the narrative, and that could answer the question of why Ghislaine might bother wasting time on Reddit. Having such an influence could be useful. Although Max was a controversial figure, they interacted on the site without arousing much suspicion until a couple of years ago, shortly after Ghislaine's arrest, when a post was made on 4chan suggesting that Max might actually be her. The most obvious similarity is the username, which is Ghislaine's surname plus Hill, which could be a reference to Headington Hill Hall, her family's mansion in Oxford, or her father's surname at birth, Hock, which doesn't directly translate from German to hill according to Google Translate, but is a name given to someone who lived in an area of high land. Alternatively, it could have been inspired by McGraw-Hill, the name of a company that Robert's company merged with years ago. This might seem a bit too on the nose, and you might wonder why Ghislaine would be stupid enough to use her own name for her Reddit account. For the most part, the posts made by Max were relatively inconspicuous. It's not like they were openly advocating for the abuse of children, and they weren't frequenting jailbait or any other questionable subreddits, at least on that account. The account was created nearly 16 years ago too, and back then people weren't quite as concerned about doxing as they are today. It was still safer not to use your real name, but many did anyway. During the time that Ghislaine was laying low before her arrest, she changed her email, used a different name for deliveries, and registered a new phone number under the name G-Max. If that's her idea of a pseudonym, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if she used her surname for a Reddit account created so long ago. In 2007, Max said this in a comment: "I believe hiding your name defeats the purpose of being a Redditor. If you need to disguise yourself in order to hoard karma points, then you are better off not being part of the community, because you can't seriously be enjoying yourself." That suggests that their username might be part of their real name, as they weren't openly giving a different name, but if they're not Ghislaine, they could literally just be called Maxwell Hill. A few of their posts have been highlighted as topics that Ghislaine might post about, including comments about the age of consent in various countries and states, and a link to an article giving 3 reasons why CP should be legal. Many of these have been taken out of context though, and Max generally condemned people who have inappropriate contact with children. If this user is Ghislaine, it makes sense that she wouldn't openly admit to being a pedophile. They might share links like that to test the waters and gauge where people stand on such topics. I wouldn't even be surprised if in her mind she made a distinction between herself and people who go for younger children, say 5 or 6 years old, because she trafficked girls who were 14 and older, so probably rationalised it in some messed up way. Some of the topics they posted about fit with Ghislaine's interests. For example, quite a few posts about ocean conservation, and Ghislaine founded an ocean charity. A few of their comments indicated they had knowledge on horse racing, and they spoke about the winners of races in 2016. Ghislaine has been photographed at the races before, and those are the kind of interests that an individual of her standing would stereotypically have. In 2010, Max left a comment describing one of their friends who was confined to a motorised wheelchair and has many other medical problems, but takes them in his stride. They said he set up several successful small businesses, built a network of friends and business partners, and that women in particular like talking to him because he is attentive and holds a great conversation. Some have speculated that this might be about Stephen Hawking, who somewhat fits the description given by Max, and also happened to have visited Epstein's Island, so must have been at least acquaintances with Ghislaine. Despite numerous posts about Donald Trump and other relevant news over the years, it seems that Max only mentioned Jeffrey Epstein a couple of times, and as far as I'm aware, never mentioned Ghislaine. Considering how big that news was, you'd think they would jump on that and link articles as soon as there were any updates. It would be a sure way to gain even more karma. Gaps in the user's post history have also been highlighted, most notably the fact that they haven't posted since 2 days before Ghislaine was arrested. This also happened to be the date that around 2,000 subreddits that promoted hate based on identity or vulnerability were banned, including the Donald and gender critical, so it has alternatively been speculated that Max quit out of protest, as some other moderators did at the time. I don't see any reason why they do that though. They didn't frequent any of the banned subreddits, many of them were alt-right, and Max seemed to be left-leaning. Considering they were accused of censoring content they didn't agree with on the subreddits they moderated, it weren't exactly a bastion of free speech either. Other gaps include 3 days when Ghislaine's mother died in 2013, and during the time she attended a Kleiner Perkins party in 2011, where former Reddit CEO Ellen Powell claimed on Twitter to have seen her. As a side note, Ellen's tweet is sometimes cited as proof that Ghislaine was in with the Reddit staff, but it wasn't a Reddit party, and this was before Ellen became the CEO, so unless I'm missing something, I don't see how it's got anything to do with Reddit staff. If anything, the tweet reflects badly on Kleiner Perkins, as Ellen claims they were aware of the allegations, but those who managed the guest list didn't seem to care. Anyway, contrary to what some Max truthers might have you believe, the user didn't post every single day besides these 3 events. There are other gaps, including one for over 2 weeks, that hasn't been explained using one of Ghislaine's life events, and I couldn't find enough information on her exact whereabouts to make any links myself. Max also posted on some days that Ghislaine was known to be at events, for example on the day Ghislaine attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding in July 2010. Aside from the inactivity since Ghislaine's arrest, neither the gaps nor the posts on the days that Ghislaine was seen out in public do much to prove or disprove the theory, in my opinion. It makes sense that you'd be offline for a few days if your mother died, but there are many other reasons why you might take some time off too, and it's not like being at an event would totally prevent you from spending any time on Reddit if you were using your phone. Going off language and spelling used by Max, I would guess that they're British. For example, they spell mum as M-U-M, and mentioned in an Ask Me Anything years ago that their favourite word was bollocks, and mentioned a sarnie and pint of beer, all of which are common words in the UK. One exception I noticed is the word colour, which Max sometimes spells C-O-L-O-U-R, the British spelling, and other times C-O-L-O-R, the American spelling. They also made a lot of posts relevant to American culture. This would make sense if Ghislaine was Max, because she grew up in Britain and is also an American citizen. Max themselves claim to have worked in the UK at one point though, which might explain how they picked up some British lingo. Other details they've given about themselves include that they're a 40-year-old man, which could be a red herring to avoid being identified, and so could the claim that they worked in Britain. Max once said that they were born in December after the 21st, which lines up with Ghislaine's birthday on the 25th of December. I'm not putting too much weight into anything they said about themselves though, because there's a good chance that some of those things are true and some aren't, but we have no idea which bits are true and which aren't. In July 2020, a mod shared a screenshot of his conversation with Max after the Ghislaine theory began circulating, to prove that they were still active after Ghislaine's arrest. This is probably the most credible evidence against the theory, but it's not definitive. People can and do Photoshop images all the time, and admins are able to send messages from any account as far as I'm aware. So if they had a reason to want to make it look like Max isn't Ghislaine, they absolutely could have done that. That does sound a little far-fetched without any solid evidence, but it's not like the admins and various moderators haven't been known to enable shady behaviour on the site. Check out my video on the Jailbait subreddit for an example of that. If Max really did send that message, and was active in private subreddits as other mods claimed, why did they stop posting publicly? Had they continued on as normal, the theory wouldn't have taken off like it did. Yet over a year and a half later, still nothing. That doesn't prove that they are Ghislaine. There are many other reasons why someone might become inactive, but aside from death, after so long on the site, and considering their goal was to become influential on it, I can't see why they'd choose to abandon it. Those that instantly dismissed all this as a baseless conspiracy theory don't believe that someone like Ghislaine would bother wasting time on Reddit, but I don't see why not. It'd be silly to assume that no rich and famous people use Reddit, and without knowing Ghislaine personally, it's impossible to say whether she does or not. But the simple assertion that someone of her status definitely wouldn't adds nothing to the discussion. If she is Max, the amount of time she spent on Reddit is a bit surprising, but not impossible, especially considering she mostly just posted links for articles that she probably read anyway. She didn't comment much, and by all accounts didn't spend much time actually moderating subreddits. Regardless, Ghislaine has described herself as an internet operator in the past. She just didn't specifically say she was a Reddit power mod. If she was, perhaps she just enjoys using the site, but as mentioned earlier, having such an influence on such a popular site could be used to her advantage. Her father was a media tycoon, and when his company merged with Maxwell Hill, it formed America's second largest textbook publisher, so in a way, her being a power mod would be following in his footsteps, especially considering Reddit and social media sites are increasingly replacing traditional news outlets. Interestingly, when Max communicated via emails with Gizmodo, they made it clear they were actively trying to be number one on Reddit. Here are a few excerpts. Then the top 5 Redditors left to work for Jason Calacanis, and AOL paid to provide content. I saw an opportunity in the hole left behind by the top 5, so I decided to focus my energy on becoming number 1 on Reddit. The advent of subreddits was great because they allowed me to hone in on a particular audience, but between digging up links and moderating, I was stretched thin. I just didn't have room to read and comment as much as I would like, hence my dismal comment karma. These days, I spend about 3 to 4 hours a day on Reddit. I am also busy with a potential business venture that is taking a large part of my time, but I try to squeeze in the odd link when I have the time. That was in late 2011, and it might be worth pointing out that Ghislaine founded the Terramar project in 2012. Could that have been the business venture that was taking up a lot of time? So we've covered some of the evidence on both sides, and while I'm not 100% convinced, there are enough similarities between Ghislaine and Max to make a somewhat compelling argument that they might be one and the same. Regardless, what's interesting about this is how set some individuals have been on making it known that Max isn't Ghislaine. Some have even been accused of lying about personal details to make the theory seem less credible. A World News mod claimed in a tweet that Max is a Malaysian man and that Maxwell Hill is the name of a place in Malaysia, not a reference to his name. Obviously those details are impossible to verify because the user hasn't been publicly identified, but some of their posts over the years suggest that that might not be the case. The theory that they're British is backed up by the language and spelling we mentioned earlier, plus some obscure British references the user has made, like a 1980s Penguin Biscuit advert. Additionally, they didn't know the names of some very popular Malaysian dishes, which would be unusual, and were informed by other Redditors, to which they replied, "Thanks Malaysia, you guys rock," which doesn't exactly sound like something someone who is also from Malaysia would say. They said on more than one occasion that they had only visited Southeast Asia, replying to another comment with, "Right, I believe it's the same in Southeast Asia countries, especially the Chinese in Singapore and Malaysia, and when I visited those countries several years ago." They also posted a lot in the subreddit 2X chromosomes. Not that men can't post there, but as the name suggests, it is a community centred around women, and the majority of members are women. The World News mod was the same mod that posted a screenshot of their conversation with Max in July 2020 to show that they were still active, but if he intentionally lied about them being a Malaysian man, can we really blindly trust the screenshot? Another mod also tried to claim that Max was a Malaysian man on Reddit, then deleted their comments when others pointed out that that was unlikely. I don't know if they did intentionally lie, or if they were just gullible and blindly believed what Max told them, but there doesn't appear to be anything to back up their claims. To me it sounds like someone googled Maxwell Hill, discovered that it was a place in Malaysia, and tried to make it fit. You can still find plenty of posts discussing the Ghislaine theory, but I noticed quite a few from around the time it emerged have been removed by moderators. Most of the removed ones seem to be either those that gained a lot of attention, or that compiled the most comprehensive list of all the similarities, and a couple of the OPs were suspended around the time they made the post too, though that might have been for other reasons. Take this one on r/Epstein, one of, if not the most popular at the time, with nearly 25,000 upvotes and many awards. One of the mods pinned a comment implying that they believed the theory was possible, even though they weren't saying it was 100% true. They told people to stop reporting the post because they weren't taking it down, and yet it was taken down sometime later. Another deleted post linked a comment from another mod, but when you click the link, you can see the post for a split second before the page suddenly redirects to "something went wrong." This could be nothing, but I don't ever remember arriving at this page on Reddit before, especially after already seeing the post for a split second. Normally either the post is removed but the thread still exists, or the link is totally broken and you see a page with the phrase, "Sorry, there doesn't seem to be anything here." I've clicked it again and again and the same happens each time, so it wasn't a one-time error. I also ran into more problems than usual when trying to view deleted comments using Reddit and other similar archives for what that's worth. All of this does seem suspicious, though some of it can be explained by mods and admins trying to prevent a witch hunt or doxing. We've all seen how they can end before. Remember, we did it, Reddit. I don't doubt that this user has received many angry and probably threatening messages, so it makes sense that they might delete posts that would encourage that. That doesn't explain why it appears that mods lied about who Max really is though. More people got more involved than they normally would in a situation like this. The reason I'm not totally sold on the cover-up theory though is a lack of clear motive for everyone involved. I guess it wouldn't look good on Reddit if it was confirmed that one of the most influential users was actually an infamous trafficker, but they could just claim they didn't know, whether they did or not, as there isn't any solid evidence to prove any of this. Even if I could just about buy that the admins might pull something like that for some reason, there's even less reason for mods to go to such lengths and knowingly lie. Perhaps they know Ghislaine personally and are intentionally lying for her, but the World News mod who tweeted about Max being a Malaysian man did so from his personal Twitter account, not anonymously, and I couldn't find anything that might suggest he knew her. People talk about things like this as if users who moderate a lot of subreddits must know the admins personally, and therefore if the admins had a reason to cover up Max's true identity, they'd make sure the mods did too. We have to remember that mods aren't paid employees, and while I'm sure some of them have spoken to or perhaps even become acquaintances of admins, it's not like being a power mod automatically puts you up there with them, having secret meetings about how to hide a PL's online persona. Are the admins really going to risk reaching out to moderators confirming that Max is Ghislaine and asking them to lie to cover it up, just assuming they won't have a problem doing so? One final theory we still need to briefly address is that Ghislaine was responsible for the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. I remember hearing this a while back, but it has resurfaced again in discussions about Max. There isn't really any evidence backing this up. Ghislaine just happens to look a lot like a police sketch of a suspect involved in the abduction. I highly doubt she was involved. Just because she's a trafficker doesn't mean she's involved in all high-profile abductions, and as far as is publicly known, she didn't interact with girls younger than 14. Madeleine was only 3 when she disappeared. Max didn't post on the day of the disappearance, though it's not confirmed that they are Ghislaine anyway, and there are a million other things they could have been doing instead of posting on Reddit, other than kidnapping a child. So overall, I'd have to dismiss that theory. As for the rest, there's a decent amount of circumstantial evidence, and while I'm not 100% convinced, I think it's plausible that Max could be Ghislaine. It could still turn out that this evidence is just coincidental. Perhaps the real Max just thought it'd be funny to let the conspiracies run wild, which were almost definitely exacerbated by the fact that Max was a controversial figure on Reddit. It's even been suggested that the whole theory was made up by users who oppose Max and their views, but even if they made a point of spreading it and misrepresented certain pieces of information, you can dig through Max's post history and find most of the similarities yourself. A few weeks ago, I came across an unsettling post on Reddit. I didn't really have time to dig into the user much deeper at the time, so I saved it with the intention of taking a closer look later. Honestly, I totally forgot about it for a while until I found it again the other day, and upon further investigation, I realised this goes much deeper than a single creepy post. Let's investigate. On the 5th of March 2022, a Reddit account was created under the name Magnikin. We'll call them Mag. As stated on the profile, it's a throwaway account, and so not much personal information is provided, which is probably wise considering the type of content this user posts. Their bio reads, "I like anime and cute girls. I love cat girls. Looking for relationship advice and dating help. 19 male. Bye." If you're wondering what on earth cat girls are, you're not the only one. But going off some of the posts Mag commented on, I deduced that they are anime characters that mostly look like humans, with certain cat features like ears and a tail. From the off, Mag dives straight in at the deep end, interacting on some relatively dark subreddits. The first two comments were, unsurprisingly, on the Catgirl Hentai subreddit and read, "How many lives do you think they have? And I want to cover my walls in more posters like this." Nothing too bad, relatively, even if the Catgirl thing is a little niche, but then they moved on to r/Guru, a subreddit dedicated to erotic, gory art, and commented on an image of two decapitated Catgirl heads with, "Catgirls have 9 lives, it'll be okay." Aside from the graphic artwork, Mag seems to have a general interest in discussing morbid topics, replying to questions on the morbid questions and death subreddits. For example, in response to a question that asked, "Is there any part of the head that you can hit with enough blunt force to kill instantly?" Mag answered, "The human head usually weighs around the same as a good bowling ball if I remember correctly, like 8 pounds. So my best guess is that so long as it has equal or greater force and makes contact with any part of the cranium, it might be able to cause hemorrhaging or at least a nasty shock from the brain hitting the skull. This is just my guess though, haha." In response to a question that asked, "Is death really so bad?" he said, "I think it's beautiful. It's a unifying trait for everyone that we all get to experience one day. I wish more people loved it as much as I do." Mag also made a few posts on these types of subreddits himself that were very disturbing to say the least, like one on morbid questions that was removed by moderators with the title, "Can you drug someone into loving you?" A few hours later, he made a post on r/Vent titled "Always Hungry" that read, "Always craving something I can't have. I can't even eat them anymore. They're gone forever and won't talk to me. I want to see them cry so bad. I'll never see them cry." You might be wondering what on earth he means by that. I can't say you'll totally understand by the end of the video, but later posts provide some context on what he's referring to here. I'll give you a hint, it's not diabetes like the only comment on the post suggested. On the 19th of March, a couple of weeks after Mag created his account, he made a subreddit, Loverspace, with the description, "Please don't look, this is personal for journaling. My therapist says journaling helps." It has 150 members at the time I'm writing this script, and the only rule of the subreddit is, "Please don't hurt me, I don't want to love you, please." In the first few posts, Mag incoherently talks about someone he evidently has a crush on who obviously doesn't feel the same. Almost all of the posts have simple titles like "In My Head," "Rip and Caress," "Lonely," and "In Love," and consist of a sentence or two. Here are a few quotes in chronological order. "In my head, we're married and in love. Everything you do tells me you want this, that you want me, and you love me too, and I'm so happy. Don't be so vulgar when it hurts. I know I don't give you anything for the pain, but that's not an excuse. Don't turn me on. Stop running from me. Those eyes are so. I'm not in lust, I'm in love. Judgment. I know there's watching eyes here now. I know you like watching me. You're sick. You're sick in the head, just like me. You want to watch my destruction the same way I do. Look then." There were 3 comments on this post, one of which, with 8 upvotes, read, "It's not really judgment so much as people being concerned you're harming yourself or others. Get a grip and tell your therapist about this account." Mag then began posting a few images of anime girls, a couple of cat girls, that taken out of context wouldn't seem too alarming, but are disconcerting when paired with captions like, "Could never leave if it was like this," and others that were more graphic, such as, "There's blood everywhere and I can't lick enough of it up." And, full of admiration, "Red love slooching down my chin right now. The posts only get more disturbing, with Mag describing some pretty horrific things that he may do to himself. Sometimes it's unclear whether he's talking directly to his crush or other Reddit users who are following the page. After a few comments from worried users, Mag made a post which provides the context I was talking about in relation to his hungry post on the Vent subreddit. "I'm not sick, physically at least. I think there's something wrong. I can't fully be satisfied with animal meat. It's like asking a sex addict to start remedial It doesn't work. It's not the real thing. It's a grotesque imitation meant to sate people who can't get what they want. This implies that what Mag was hungry for is in fact human meat. From this alone, it's not clear whether or not he has actually tried it somehow, or he simply fantasizes about it. In the next post, he had this to say: "Finally able to say it. Made this for my crush. Hope they realise how serious I am about making us real and permanent. I hope I can get it to them before it oxidizes too much. The red is too pretty. Very romantic colour." At first, considering there are no attachments in the post, I thought he was talking about the subreddit itself, until I saw the next post, which is a photo of a piece of paper with a message scrawled in what appears to be blood. It says, "Each day you ignore my adoration, my devotion to you. As a romantic, my intent may seem mildly strange. I'll keep it brief. I love you. The way you feel on my skin, your smell. I know you taste divine. I need you. Bind me up and make me yours. You're everything. Make me one with the breath inside those pretty lungs." There are also various red drops and smears on the paper, love hearts, and Japanese letters that translate to "I love you." That could suggest that Mag is Japanese, which might partly account for his incoherent writing style if English isn't his first language. Then again, he could be from anywhere in the world and simply learnt Japanese as a second language. Naturally, this post garnered more attention than his others before it, with 19 upvotes and 16 comments. Mag claimed that some users had told him to take action, and that's exactly what he did, stating that he wanted to feel proud of himself and wanted them to be proud of him too, and know that he listened. A couple of commenters cast doubt on Mag's claims that the message was written in blood, stating that it looks more like red ink because blood dries darker and starts flaking unless it's mixed with water. Mag replied, "Fresh unoxidized, got ugly rusty colour after open air for too long. I think she hated it because the romance had gone away. You've been saying my wording was intense too. This is good advice. I will try again." Another user disputed that it was fake based on personal experience of writing things in blood as a cringy teenager, and said that the colour is accurate if the blood was fresh, because fake blood tends to be darker on application. It does appear that the photo was taken very soon after the message was written, as some bits don't look quite dry, so I can't say for sure either way, but it's semi-believable that it was blood and not fake blood or red ink. I tried reverse searching the image and nothing else came up, so regardless of what the message is written in, it seems that the image is his and not one he just found somewhere on the internet. One user pointed out how some of the letters were in capitals, causing another user to wonder if it was some kind of code, but they weren't able to decipher anything, and neither was I. Not that I possess any code breaking skills, but it seems like this is either Mag's normal style of writing, or it's because of the presumably manic state he was in while writing it. It seems like writing messages or creating artwork with blood is a somewhat regular hobby for Mag, as he later reveals that he keeps blood in syringes for it and posted a photo of one of his syringes on his subreddit. We can piece together bits of information from posts on this subreddit and others to gain some insight into the situation with Mag and his crush. It's not clear whether they're male or female, as Mag usually refers to them as they, and occasionally has referred to them as both he and she, and he states on his profile that he is bi, so it could be either. Either way, he's known them since high school, and it would be an understatement to say that it sounds like they didn't reciprocate his feelings. Quote, "My current crush was rough with my heart when we met, didn't like me very much, and I apologised a lot. Dislocated my jaw behind school at recess, for example." Quick side note, the use of the word recess makes me wonder if Mag is actually American, or at least went to school or grew up in America. I'm not sure if that word is common in Japan, but it's certainly not a word we really use here in England. Anyway, this comment makes me wonder if their crush might actually be a straight male, because generally speaking, in school, boys tend to get into fights more often than girls. A boy physically harming another boy is a lot more common than a girl harming a boy, and sadly it's not unheard of for gay people to be assaulted due to homophobia. It seems that Mag is obsessed with this person, so if we assume for a second that they are male, they wouldn't necessarily even have to be homophobic to feel so uncomfortable with his advances that they reacted violently. That's not me condoning violent behaviour, by the way, just trying to propose an explanation. That is pure speculation that they might be a straight male though. Obviously there are exceptions. Mag stated that he used to stalk and steal from his crush to provoke them into beating him, so it could be a female, as it sounds like he knew exactly what buttons to push to drive someone to lash out. The stalking didn't stop after high school, as Mag admitted he still keeps tabs on them now. He knows their home address and what bars they often visit because they're not very private on social media. Let this be a lesson to anyone who overshares online. He spoke of his plans to approach them and stated that he didn't want to do anything bad or controlling, and he planned to be as casual as possible. Problem is though, if he doesn't see the issue with keeping tabs on them in the first place, can we really trust his judgment on what actions are appropriate if he does meet them? He seems to lack self-awareness of just how disturbing the fantasies he shares related to his crush are. For example, he talks about spoon-feeding them and says he doesn't think they need arms or legs because their existence is a suggestion that he's incapable of providing for them and doing everything for them. As if what we've already covered wasn't disturbing enough, Mag claims to have actually murdered people, and in one comment even described how he killed each victim, giving the exact dates it happened. His victims have included males and females. He rarely gives many details about them, no more than he was cute and short, for example. He claims to have eaten the bodies, saying one can provide food for him for a minimum of a week, and gives various details on cannibalism, including advice to others on the best parts of the body to consume and how to preserve it. In addition to practicing cannibalism himself, he also expresses interest in being eaten. He mentioned that he likes the idea of eating someone while they're also eating him. Although he sees death as a positive occurrence, something that unites us all, and he likes the idea of a loved one ending his life, it doesn't sound like he actively wants to die anytime soon, it's just a fantasy that excites him. In addition to eating his victims, he also does inappropriate things with the corpses. That's all I'm going to say on that in this cut, but I'm sure you can surmise. Because of this, he rejects the suggestion from some users that he's an incel, claiming he is often active, just not with conventional partners. It's not clear exactly how he meets his victims. He claims to have been for drinks with one of the women first, so I don't know if he's meeting them out and about, or perhaps on dating sites. He does go into quite a bit of detail when describing the process of the murder and what happens after, so if he is trolling, he seems quite dedicated. It's quite baffling how he often apologises to other users on his posts when they express concern, saying he doesn't want to worry them, yet sees no issue in literally murdering people. Quote, "I liberate the hearts and souls of pretty boys and girls from their rubbery, fragile flesh prisons. You don't get that thrill from killing anything on four legs. Violence is the surest form of intimacy, and I show my love freely, like you show your hatred. Wouldn't you want to liberate someone from the plane they loathe? Constant agony they never stop screaming in pain from. It's torture. I don't torture, I give. When there's no life left, their gifts are left with me. I stay thankful for them. They're generous to me." Mag insists that he doesn't like cruelty for the sake of cruelty, and that he doesn't do what he does for the same reasons others do. He seems to see it as a way of expressing love, which is incredibly messed up, and if that's how he views his actions, I think it would take a lot of work to reverse that mentality. I don't think he has specified when he first started murdering people, but we know he's been stalking his crush since high school, so he's been on a downward spiral for a number of years. He does seem to acknowledge that it would be better if he didn't murder people, though seems to find solace in the fact that there are others who express love in the same way he does, which I worry might encourage him to continue. One of his posts from May, titled "Curiosity," read, "So interested in the goings-on of my little boring life, expecting a slip-up and a picture of remains. I don't ask for attention, validation, your roles here aren't above or below mine. I'm not better than anyone, I just need advice from people better at love and expressing it than I am." There seems to be people equally enraged with the idea that I could be a liar, as there are people who despise how I live and eat. And a small minority of you, like me, have reached out to me to ask if your feelings of hunger requited by marred skin and broken bones gracing your lips makes you an abnormality. It doesn't. You are an outlier, and I see you. I love you. I love everyone who berates or consoles me equally. It's a thrilling exchange. I am trying. I am growing. Very slowly. If you're thinking Mag should probably see a therapist, you're not the only one. In response to comments from people recommending therapy, he claims he is seeing a therapist, though I question some of the things they have apparently told him. He claims to have a positive relationship with the therapist, stating that they're very nice and he talks to them often, and he says they told him he's made lots of progress and that this is all normal for someone who went through what he did. The therapist apparently said he's just a hopeless romantic, which is very concerning. They're either a really incompetent therapist, or they don't know the extent of Mag's fantasies and apparent actions. If they knew he's claiming to murder people, they are obliged to report that to the relevant authorities. Or Mag isn't seeing a therapist at all. Who knows? The only thing I am sure of is that he has not revealed the unadulterated contents of his post history to a qualified and proficient therapist, or he'd probably be behind bars right now. There is a lot of speculation on Mag's posts as to whether or not he's trolling, and honestly I'm not sure. Does that mean I wholeheartedly believe he's actually murdered people? No. But I think he might be a mentally unstable and potentially dangerous individual who probably would harm someone given the chance. I don't doubt for a second that he fantasizes about it and probably posts on Reddit acting like he has actually done it as a way of role-playing. If that is the case, let's hope he sticks to that and doesn't take it any further. That said, I can't rule out the possibility that he is just trolling. He claims to have created the subreddit as a personal journal, but he must have known that people would likely come across it and it'd pique their interest. Why not just get a notebook or post online privately? That doesn't necessarily mean he isn't serious though. There are serial killers that get a kick out of broadcasting their crimes with the protection of anonymity on the internet. It does seem like he wants people to read his ramblings and even posted an update a couple of weeks ago for those who have been following his posts. Being an attention seeker doesn't make it any more or less likely that Mag is a troll who is fabricating this whole story. Sure, a few lines here and there sound like they could have been written by an edgy teenager, though he is still a teenager, and generally speaking, I could buy that his writing style comes across like he is genuinely suffering with mental illness rather than just pretending to be. His posts sometimes don't make sense, but in a way that makes it seem like they make sense to him, rather than him just writing gibberish for the sake of it. Compare some of the posts and comments on the Loverspace subreddit with others that are equally disturbing but less erratic, and I wonder if they show the difference between him in a relatively normal state of mind as opposed to a manic one. That's just my opinion. I'm not a psychiatrist, so if anyone can provide any more insight in the comments, I'd love to hear it. It has been noted that a few of the details he has given in relation to his experience of murdering people and committing other heinous crimes have been factually wrong, or at least that he's somewhat misguided. For example, he claims to have used chloroform on one of his victims, which despite what you see in the movies, probably isn't the most effective way of knocking someone out. It's not as simple as soaking a cloth with it, holding it up to their face, and they pass out within seconds. It would take a lot longer. That said, it was at one point used as an anaesthetic agent, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Mag has used it on his victims. Some have suggested that the account and subreddit might be part of an ARG. In fact, there was a post about this on the ARG subreddit, but there doesn't really appear to be anything to solve or investigate. As far as I can tell, it's not like Mag is leaving clues that could reveal some kind of hidden meaning, so if this whole thing is fabricated, to me it seemed far more likely that he is simply trolling and it's no deeper than that. That was until I came across something that introduces a whole new theory. Be Loved is a visual novel, a choose-your-own-adventure style game demo that you can find on itch.io, created by someone who goes by the name of Robbie. It's been in development for at least a year now, with the most recent update being in November 2021. The game begins with you in a dingy bar, not exactly enjoying your night, but you have around an hour to kill until you can get a lift home from your friend Mila, so you decide to sit down next to the bar. A man, Andre, approaches you and strikes up a conversation. After chatting for a short while, he buys you a drink and you have the crazy idea of asking him to kiss you so you can send a photo to Mila that will hopefully get her off your back, as she wants you to hook up with someone. He agrees, but as he leans in, he quickly pulls back before offering you a mint because your breath stinks. You take the mint, kiss him, and continue chatting. You're not exactly an experienced drinker, so you quickly begin to feel intoxicated, to the point where you're struggling to remain conscious, and Andre has to keep shaking you to wake you up. Time passes, you still haven't heard from Mila, and so Andre kindly asks if you'd like to get a couple of hours sleep at his place, which is nearby. He gives you the address and tells you to text Mila with it, making you feel a little more comfortable going home with someone you only met less than an hour ago. That comfort would soon dissipate when you arrive though, as Andre's demeanour changes. Turns out he spiked you with the mint, and he puts a collar around your neck, leaving you half conscious as he goes into another room, giving you a brief opportunity to escape. You beg for help from the first person you see, though it turns out they know Andre, and they lead you right back to him. The demo ends shortly after. You might be wondering what this game has to do with Mag. Well, I noticed a few similarities that led me to consider that Mag might actually be Robbie, the creator of this game, or that Mag is Andre from the game. This is pure speculation, I don't have any solid proof, it might even seem like a bit of a stretch, and as a result I ask that you make no attempt to contact Robbie, but here's a few of the potential links I found. While only a few minutes of gameplay have been released, we see themes similar to those discussed on Mag's account, such as torture, cannibalism, inappropriate acts with corpses, and the use of substances to kidnap someone. Andre's been in love with you for quite some time, even though you don't seem to know who he is, and he's been keeping tabs on your social media, similar to what Mag claims to have been doing with his crush. Mag said he knows which bars his crush frequents, implying showing up to one of these is how he'd approach them, and that's exactly how Andre approaches you in the game. An image posted on Twitter showing Andre's characteristics lines up with some of the things we know about Mag. For example, Andre is 19, so is Mag. The image implies Andre frequently says, "I'm sorry," and so does Mag. Andre cries often, and Mag has mentioned crying a few times in his post. Andre's into catboys, meat, anime and pain, and so is Mag. Under this are 3 things that I presume Andre dislikes: arrogance, hunger and selfishness, also consistent with what we know about Mag. Andre is a butcher by day, weeaboo by night. Weeaboo, in case you didn't know, is a slang term for a Western person who is obsessed with Japanese culture. This also applies to Mag if we run with the assumption that he's American, based on some of the words he uses. Finally, one of the points on the image is, Eros, eat your heart out. This could tie in with Mag referring to himself as a hopeless romantic. Robbie's Twitter account has the name Gutter Leech, and leeches have been mentioned numerous times on the Loverspace subreddit, with Mag describing himself as one. The Twitter account also features various references to topics discussed by Mag, including cannibalism and other morbid interests. The name Magnikin is presumably Magni and kin joined together. Magni basically means large or great in Latin, and Andre's character has a very big and muscular build. The word kin usually refers to a character that someone identifies with, commonly used in anime fandoms. Robbie lists various kins on a site linked on his Twitter page. Comparing the writing in the letters supposedly written in blood with posters in the game and images posted on Twitter, there isn't an obvious match as some letters are written differently. However, I could buy them being written by the same person, with the blood letter being an attempt to disguise handwriting. It's also perhaps worth noting that both feature an inconsistent mix of upper and lowercase letters. The letter features Japanese writing, and Robbie speaks Japanese. A few months ago, Mag posted an image of some artwork he was working on, and while I extensively scrolled through Robbie's Twitter page and was unable to find this exact image on there, there are various other images created by him that strongly resemble the art style used by Mag. So if Robbie is Mag, what is the purpose of the account and the subreddit? There are a few possibilities. Right now, there is no mention of the game in any of Mag's posts, so he's not currently using the account to promote the game, though it's possible he intends to in the future, if and when it gains traction. Perhaps Robbie created the Mag account to roleplay as a way of getting into character. If that is the case, he's clearly quite dedicated, as people have tried to contact Mag on Reddit and have been terrified by the responses they received, totally convinced that the account is genuine. Maybe both the game and the Reddit account are ways of expressing fantasies that Robbie has. There is a disclaimer under the game that reads, "Themes expressed in-game are in no way condoned, endorsed, or upheld by any persons involved with its creation. Anything depicted is fictional and will remain as such." I believe he'd put that regardless of whether he was actually into those things himself. And I'm not saying you can't make content on topics that you're not actually into. I made a video on penectomy and that's certainly not my jam. But that was one video. It's not like I've created a game on it, and most of my social media posts relate to it, and I created a Reddit account to roleplay it. It does make me wonder if Robbie does fantasize about at least some of these topics. Once again, I have no solid evidence to back up my suggestion that Robbie might be behind the Mag account. I just noticed some interesting links, and if he is, this genuinely might be all totally fictional, so by all means, investigate yourself and let me know in the comments if you find any more information, but do not contact him. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any topics you might like me to cover in the future. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.